Okay, and we are live on YouTube.
Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon session of the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing of January 25th, 2022. We will begin this afternoon with public hearing item number 4, and this meeting is being held via Zoom. If you'd like to testify on any of the public hearing items this afternoon, you may do so by joining the Zoom meeting at the estimated time. We are about a half hour behind schedule. And if you just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so at our live YouTube channel. And with that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through the afternoon agenda.
Thanks, Sarah. And as noted, we'll begin with item number 4. This is LPC 22-04139, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1186, Lot 83. 393 West End Avenue in the West End Collegiate Historic District Extension. This is a colonial revival style apartment building designed by Goldner and Goldner and built in 1927. And the application is to install a marquee, modify masonry openings and install windows, and to modify and enlarge a rooftop addition.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen and then you can advance the slides and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you. Cass Stackelberg, Higgins, Grace, Barth & Partners. Nice to see you all this afternoon. Get this going. I'm joined by John Cetra and Eugene Flitteron of Cetra Ruddy Architects. John and I will be doing the presentation this afternoon and eager to get started. 393 West End Avenue is located on the southwest corner of 79th Street and West End Avenue. It's located in the West End Collegiate Historic District Extension. It's a 15-story apartment building completed in 1927. And as Corey mentioned, there are 3 components to the proposal that we're going to be sharing with you today. One is replacing a non-historic fabric awning that extends out to the curb with a new glass and bronze framed canopy at the building entry, modifying 6 window openings and infilling them with 1-over-1 double hung windows on the non-visible side elevation, not visible in this view on the back of the building. And then modifying an existing, actually original penthouse that was there since the building's construction, modifying the height of the penthouse and modifying at the backside the footprint of that penthouse. The penthouse is not visible in this view, nor will be it if we are to gain approval for the proposal, but it is visible from greater distances. There are no areas of new visibility, but you'll see there's some modest increases in visibility, and you'll see that as we go through the presentation. Some historic images of the building from the 1940s tax photo collection. The view south on West End Avenue here on the left, and the view north on West End here on the right. This is 393 West End Avenue, highlighted with the arrow. And you can see actually in this historic photo, even just peeking up over the parapet from this view, the historic penthouse is visible, and obviously more visible as you move north on West End Avenue. And you'll see in other images, there are many visible penthouses along West End Avenue historically and also currently. The view north, like many of the block fronts on West End, there's a mix of low-rise row houses and taller apartment buildings, often on the corners. And you can just see this sort of irregular elevation. This is the south elevation of the building, and a regular roof line with bulkheads, chimneys, and then obviously this very dominant water tank and its support below. The first component of the proposal is the canopy. John?
Yes, okay. So what we're seeing here, just for the record, my name is John Cetra. I'm the architect working on this project. The firm is Cetra Ruddy Architecture. So we were in charge of looking at a number of different aspects of the building. One in particular was focused here, as you can see, on the canopy. The canopy is a very conventional one that's found in many buildings along West End Avenue, where it's fabric, semicircular, coming out to the curb. And you can see the framing is very, very simple. Framing within on the interior underneath the canopy, The thing that was that I would like to point out here is how, although we've seen a lot of these canopies here, this canopy really pays no attention to the architecture and the fabric of the existing entry element, the stone entry element that you see here. It's tucked in to the opening in a way that, of course, provides protection, but doesn't really allow for, I think, a proper kind of connectivity to this element, which is quite beautiful. The stone detailing around the entrance is unique, and as you can see here, and it's sort of as almost like a plaque that was integrated into the building. So our idea was to try to do something which would be more sympathetic to the current opening. And so if we go to the next slide, we can see here from a distance what that looks like on the street. We've seen many canopies like this, but I think the next slide will highlight what it is that we were trying to do by creating something which was not looking as a temporary kind of canopy, but something that would be built out of metal and glass that would be shorter, not coming out to the curb, comes out at about 10 feet, and we have a detailed dimension that we can show you on that, but also something that would have a gentle curve, almost mimicking the curve that's actually within the bronze the bronze doors, which are original as far as we know, and will be restored and cleaned up as well. So the combination of the glass and the metal lightens the entry quite a bit, and it allows the entry to kind of really shine, I think, in a way that has been minimized by the canvas canopy. Next. So in terms of details, you can see here examples of the kind of glass that we would use. It'd be a fritted glass on the top so that it does hide some of the dirt that will always accumulate. It's on a glass surface, making it less visible. As I said before, it would come out about under 10 feet, 9 foot 8 to be exact, and it's almost a square. It's 9'4" wide, so that it would fit within the entrance, and it has a slight slope in terms of the bracketing that we're creating on the sides in order to allow water that would accumulate on the top to be run off onto an integrated channel, which would then go back into the building. So less water actually accumulating on the sidewalk as well. Next. And here are some of the details which we've worked out to integrate within the canopy itself. The gutters that I've mentioned, there is a slope to it, and it's a very, very simple shape that's created out of bent metal components, sloping back into the building and taking that water into the building as well. Minimally designed plates that would be required in order to anchor it properly. There is a tie rod that ties back into structural columns that exist behind the stone. So there would be some small openings that we would create there and then restore back to the original appearance in order to make the connection to the structure. But it is a fairly simple element because we didn't want something that would kind of overpower the architecture that's there. We think that entry is very, very beautiful, and we want to highlight it as much as we can. Thank you.
So just looking at a few historic examples and within the past 10 years, recent commission approved examples. I think commissioners, as you know, whether it's within the West End Collegiate Historic District or the neighboring districts just to the north of Riverside West End District, these large scale apartment buildings, many of which were designed with a range of different canopy and marquee types, some rectilinear like the one at the center of 498 West End Avenue, and ones that are also more curvilinear like those on the left and right at the bottom of the slide. And then looking at the range of canopies that have been approved by the commission, on the far right, West 555 West End Avenue, is just a very simple, sleek design, and ones that are a bit more historicizing, like those at the middle on the left. This is a building that we think can withstand a delicate but well-detailed canopies, as John has described it, and its materiality and placement we think is appropriate for the building of this type. Continuing on to the second portion of the proposal, this is alterations to the windows along the side elevation. So this is along the building's west-facing elevation. And really the proposal here is about the windows themselves, the opening that we are proposing. This is an overall view looking southeast from the east side, west side of Riverside Drive and 79th Street. This is the area of work, and then a zoomed in view. And what we're talking about is these windows here. There are actually 6 of them. The ones below are obscured by the apartment building directly to the west. We are only proposing to modify these windows. And then actually the staff has been able to approve the enlarging of the opening, but the item that's before you is actually the infill. The rules that govern staff approvals allow for the enlargement of the opening, but they require that the window that be installed match the historic configuration. That configuration was a multi-light casement window. What we are proposing is a 1/1 double hung window that matches all the windows on all the side elevations, or particularly this west-facing elevation. We're only talking about 6 windows, and I'll show an elevation just so you get a sense of what that looks like at a larger context. So again, this is the west elevation of the building existing on the left, proposed on the right, and you can just see, hopefully, this outline here represents the silhouette of the building in the foreground. So we're proposing to change these 6 windows, which are above the roof line of the adjacent property. The staff has approved enlarging the openings. We're proposing putting in a paired double hung window that's 1/1, and you can see all the other windows basically on this elevation are already 1/1. This is a line of louvers, and then this is a line of sort of a unusual multi-light hopper window. All the others are 1/1. So the proposal here is to infill this enlarged opening with a 1/1 window, which we think in the context of the overall elevation is not going to impact the reading of the building, and as I mentioned, is on the secondary side elevation. Highlighting elevation here, just indicating again that this pattern exists. This double hung configuration, paired double hung, exists elsewhere on the elevation. And with this installation, it's not sort of interrupting a regular pattern that one sees across the back side of this building. It's already quite irregular. So finally, turning to the roof, the final component of the proposal. On the left, an aerial view, and on the right, a rendered view. There are a few different component parts to the rooftop modification that we're proposing. So you can see there's an existing penthouse at the roof. This is original to the building. It's been refinished with a white painted stucco and a simple asphalt roof. The proposal is to raise the height of this portion, this sort of L here, of the penthouse, and finish the roof with a green roof. All the mechanicals, all the bulkheads will remain in their current location. Only the roof level will be raised. Setbacks remain the 10-foot on the east side, 10-foot on the north side. That remains consistent between existing and proposed. And then, of course, you'll see in greater detail, as John will take you through this, changes to the openings across the elevation. But what we're maintaining is a sort of punched opening reading, solid, a sort of appropriate solid to void relationship, a heavy corner pier represented, and you'll see in the materiality, we think it's actually an improvement to what's there today. Flipping around to the other side, so now we're looking at the back. This is that west elevation. We were just looking at the windows. This is 79th Street here, West End here. So in the back of the building, I'll just draw your attention here. In order to connect a building stair here and back in this area, code requires that we have a covered egress path so that there's a metal and glass canopy that covers that egress path, and it is slightly visible from views within Riverside Park. So I'll show you that, but that's an element of the rooftop scope. And we're also infilling this back corner of the roof with new habitable space. John? Oh, sorry, let me just finish with this. Some existing photos, you can just see the sort of character of the elements up on the roof. stucco-clad bulkheads, mechanical equipment. Certainly no significant features up here. But again, as I mentioned, the railings will be removed, but all the mechanical equipment and bulkheads will remain, and the roof level will just be raised around the perimeter east and north sides of the roof. John?
Right, great. So if you just could go back one moment to that slide just previously, I just wanted to point out one thing, that as you're up on this high roof, you'll notice that there's a railing, safety railing there, which is set back about 10 or 12 feet or more from the edge of the existing penthouse roof. And that's important to note because I'm going to make a reference to that once again. Next, please. So this is showing the proposed material that we'd like to cover the penthouse with. It's a porcelain panel made by Porcelanosa. It has a slightly stucco texture to it. The picture on the left is actually a 3-inch by 3-inch sample that was taken in daylight to try to get the right sense of color. The picture on the right is a larger piece of the same material, which is 18 by 36, and that happens to be the size that we would use for the recladding of the structure. But just to give you a sense of the difference between what you have seen now, which is a brighter stucco finish in some of the photos, here it's a little bit more subdued, but it is something which we thought was appropriate as a starting point for the cladding. Next. So the plan, just to orient you with the plan, North 79th Street is to the top, West End Avenue is to the right. Currently, there are 3 smaller penthouse units that exist there, A, B, and C. There is a roof area that you see the setback along West End Avenue and 79th Street, which is 10 feet, and that is our kind of starting point. We're not building out from there. We are respecting that line and staying within it. There is an area in the back of the area of the penthouse, which is I've outlined sort of in red here, and you can see it in the proposed plan, which is an area which we would like to fill in. This is all in compliance with the zoning bulk control, so we don't have any issue with with the zoning. You see here now that what we're doing is creating from 3 apartments, making one larger apartment, which has a couple of impacts. One is that in order to maintain the access and the egress to the 2 stairs, there, as Cass mentioned, there is a walkway which will be covered that will kind of go around the building here, so that both residents needing to exit an emergency or the fire department will have a covered, protected way to get from one stair to the next, because there will not be that same, as it is now, an internal public corridor. In a sense, the corridor is turned outside and onto the setbacks. The other thing that comes with making a larger apartment out of 3 smaller ones is that the placement and the size of the rooms are more appropriate to the kind of apartment here that we're trying to create. And I think the next slide will show that when we started looking at, here, this is the roof plan. So you can see the existing, here we go, existing. This is where that safety fence was that I pointed out on the roof. Actually, it's here. On this one, kind of meanders around and does a few different things. But we're still limiting access to that roof, essentially for the purpose of service, because you see all the mechanical equipment that's up here. But what I was starting to say before is that with the new plan, we wanted to do something to create some volume within the space that was more appropriate to the kind of an apartment that we were creating, but also recognizing that we did not want to create something that was, visually taking away from the building. And so the next drawing, I believe, will show some of the sections. So here on the top page is the existing section that shows the setbacks from the primary facades. It shows the heights that, and interestingly, in this building, the ceiling heights were actually somewhat lower than what are the typical ceiling heights that are shown directly below the penthouse. But it does also here show the height of the existing penthouse with the additional height of the safety railing, which was 3'6.5" and you see that on the top. So what we thought we could do is to work with some of the heights, because visually, and you'll see in the studies, that what you see is you see a part of the penthouse, and you currently will see that safety railing in various places as well. So in taking that total height, which is about 13 feet, and trying to work within that, what we are proposing to do is to create some heightened spaces within the plan. So some of the places like the dining room or living room, some of those areas that are along the perimeter, and also the primary bedroom that is in the southwest corner of the apartment. These are the areas where we'd like to propose to create some additional height within the units, but not something that would be visually higher than what's there now, which is with the combination of the building and the safety railing is essentially the same. The mechanicals will remain. There will be some replacement of units, but it's all within the same location and same size that you saw in the bird's eye view. I'll also point out that in this area here, this is facing west, where there is that little canopy which is created to maintain clear access and egress in an emergency. Next. So going through each elevation on each side, you'll see again, what I'm referring to here. On the top, you see the existing equipment, you see the existing railing and the existing stucco facade with a series of punched windows on those facades. So our idea is to use these porcelain panels, which are incredibly durable and I think will last another 100 years at least, in a pattern like a brick pattern, which they would be 36 inches long and 18 inches high. So that's what you're seeing here. We're creating a simple kind of language with the window openings. Essentially, every window is a door into a room. It just comes down to close to the floor as it's shown here, and it's also shown as a divided light pattern, as well. So this is the east elevation. We go around. Next slide. We'll show the north. This is facing 79th Street. So some of the primary rooms, like the dining room and kitchen and living room, are essentially in this part of the plan, where we'll provide, accessible access to the terrace, and raising that wall such that it is very, very similar in height. It's actually, I think, a half an inch lower than exactly what one would have under the existing condition. And it's more uniform as well. And then going around, this is the south side again, where the water tank and existing stair bulkhead are coming out in front of the wall, and all of these other surfaces here are essentially receding behind. So that wall is getting straightened out in a sense and cleaned up, as you see in the picture below. Next. And then on our west elevation as well, you see this is the northwestern stair bulkhead. That's the elevator bulkhead that is beyond the image, and then the southern stair bulkhead, which you saw in the previous slide. So this area here is essentially the area which we're building out and just essentially flattening out the wall, and again creating a simple opening with the window and door combination that we're proposing. Next.
So just looking at some visibility studies that we've done, just to explain, on the left will be an overall view of the existing, and then a detailed view. In the lower left, the building has been undergoing local law work, so there's some rigging up there. We've managed to build a mock-up around the rigging, but what I think you can see in the zoom views, but perhaps not even see in the sort of straight-on views, is that there is some modest visibility of the existing penthouse, but it is difficult to perceive. So this is standing on the east side of Broadway, looking past the Apthorpe, the existing and the proposed. The existing penthouse and that bulkhead are visible above the primary cornice of the building. And with the increase in height at the perimeter, it is slightly more visible. But again, reminding you all that this is not how you perceive this from the street at all. And just moving around the building, so now we're in Riverside Park. Again, looking, basically up 79th Street, the existing and the proposed. This is with everything leafed out, but again, it's very difficult to perceive. The zoomed view will show a slight increase in visibility of the penthouse, and this is really the only area where you see here that covered walkway connecting the two building stairs. Taking a few steps out of the park now on the west side of Riverside Drive, again, looking up 79th Street. The penthouse really is not visible in this view, but you can just see here we've rendered in the enlarged masonry opening with the 1/1 paired double hungs that match the openings and the infill elsewhere on that elevation. So a fairly imperceptible modification there as well. Looking north on West End Avenue, you can just see a tail end of the enlarged addition back here and the raised addition or raised penthouse on the West End Avenue side. But I think, again, with this irregular roof line, it's really sort of a very modest change. And then, of course, the mechanicals, the bulkheads, and this very dominant water tower are still the primary features and tallest features on the roof. And then this long view, this is now 3 or 4 blocks to the north, looking down down Riverside Drive. Again, you can see here the existing penthouse is visible, and the proposed would be slightly more visible. And I think it's important to note that with this proposed modification, we're not creating any new areas of visibility. There's just a modest increase in the various vantage points. What we've also looked at, obviously, in this view looking south down West End Avenue, this is actually fairly similar to that tax photo view. So again, this is just the penthouse peeking up over the existing cornice line as it appears in the historic tax photo. What we've also done is collected a few historic and existing photos just to illustrate sort of the character of the district, because I think it's important to note, given the development pattern of the West End Collegiate Historic District, where you have collections of row houses constructed in the last few decades of the 19th century, and then large-scale apartment building development from the first quarter of the 20th century, you have this variation of scales, particularly along the avenues, West End Avenue. There are row houses remaining on West End, not only in the mid-block. And so what that does is it sets up these varying scales. And there are long views, and even historically, you can see there are visible penthouses here over not only over side elevations, but here over primary elevations of corner buildings, very similar to 393 West End Avenue. This view of 617 West End Avenue, you can see a large penthouse up over the cornice line, and if one were to move back in this photo, it would be significantly taller. And then elsewhere on West End Avenue, large scale penthouses historically that existed over over primary elevations. This photo here is the same as this view. We included it in color just so you could see it a bit more clearly. The masonry cladding around the water tank has been removed over time, but you can see the penthouse visible here over the side elevation, but also you can begin to see the penthouse here over the primary elevations of the corner building at 71st Street, and then a few other views on West End Avenue. And then finally, this is a view, actually a rendering of an approved penthouse, considerably more visible than what we're proposing at 393 West Avenue. So I think in terms of the visibility, it's consistent with what one might have seen historically, and certainly what one sees today in the district. And then in terms of the design and materiality, it's a sort of a secondary cladding material, modular, similar to the brick, but secondary to it, with the same characterization of punched openings, multi-light infill, and feeling very much like it belongs on the top of this handsome apartment building. So with that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, oh, yeah, we have one question. Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
I have 3 questions, one, and it has to do with elements of your building. Okay, so the building essentially is colonial revival.
Yes.
And what inspiration did you use for the marquee? Is that a French revival, or what was the inspiration for the marquee?
Well, you know,
John, I'm going to let you answer that, but I also have something to add to when you're done. Perhaps we can go up to the rendering on, I'll give you a sheet number in just a second. Or maybe am I still controlling this? Maybe I can get myself. Sorry, I can get there myself.
As we're getting there, I'll tell you what our thoughts were on that, because when you look at some of the precedents on that previous slide that showed the ways that a more elaborate or stationary canopy or marquee was created. Some of them are quite beautiful. Every one of them is quite beautiful, and there was something about the inspiration of 495 West End Avenue or 498, which is actually one that we restored just recently, that they fit within a structure that was somewhat more ornate. It has to go with the building. But we did not want to create something that was so historicist that one would then be confused about whether or not this was something that had been there or was something new. So we thought that the inspiration was not so much stylistic as more as meeting the requirements for creating a lighter structure with glass that you could actually appreciate and see the framework of the interior through it, and something that then also worked coincidentally with the curvature of the metalwork that was actually within the door. So it was very, very simple elements here that we used. And quite frankly, the entrance of the building is probably the most ornate part of the entire building. So the masonry here is very simple, it's elegant, it's not overdone. If anything, if you compare this rendering to the photo that came before it, some of the details that are even more subdued. When you actually see this photograph, it wasn't as sunny a day, but so there's something to be said about taking what is there and creating something which fits in that doesn't necessarily have a specific stylistic reference, but something that works with what we found.
Thank you very much.
I'm just going to add one thing that I think is sort of interesting about this building. While it has this colonial revival style designation in the designation report, the building as a late 1920s building, there's a sort of almost modernist treatment of the facade. There's a tautness to it. It's very flat on the upper floors. And I think there's something about this sort of simple, taut, bronze framed canopy that actually fits really nicely with the language overall of the building while not being directly referential, as John just described.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, we'll move to public testimony. We may have more questions after that. Sure. And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
All right, thank you. So first I'm going to be calling on Kay Carpin from Manhattan Community Board 7. Okay, you should be receiving a request from me. I see that you're rejoining as a panelist. All I need for you to do is please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
There we go. Hello, everybody. Kay Carpin, CB7, Preservation Committee. Overall, the community board approves this as appropriate to the historic district. The canopy is lovely. The west facade changes are no big deal. We spent a long time on the penthouse, and while we approved it by a narrow vote as appropriate to the district, the increase of ceiling heights resulting in the larger bulk of the thing was not pleasing to many of our members, and they didn't quite buy the wall equals safety railings mathematical formula. So with that and so we recommended a lowering of the overall facade, but with that we approved as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Sean Christandy from Landmark West should be receiving a request from me. Okay, Sean, I see that you're rejoining the meeting as a panelist. I just need for you to please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Sasha. Good afternoon, Commissioner Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee believes that overall this series of interventions is net positive for this landmark. The marquee replaces a non-original feature with an updated statement that enhances the streetscape. The reconfigured penthouse does not cost the building any historic features, and the raised parapet, although visible at a distance, softens the view and disguises mechanical clutter above. As for the doubled windows, the aspect ratio is believable and is pulled from the vocabulary of the building. Our committee wondered why level 9 window was not also doubled in order to maintain the visual cohesion of that elevation over its neighbor. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee recommends approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me take a glance back over. That was it for our signups, and I do not see any more hands raised, so there is no one else who wishes to speak. I'll pass it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Okay, so Cass and John, would you like to respond to some of the comments we've heard?
Well, I would say, oh, sorry, Cass. I would say that the level 9 window was not proposed because of its proximity to the roof line of the adjacent building. So we didn't see the value there of continuing the pattern down to that floor level. I think, and that would be my response to that question. The question about the height of the penthouse or the enlargement of the penthouse was something which we tried to balance what we were doing, recognizing that we did not want to create a monument up there, a larger volume. But and as Cass pointed out with other examples of rooftop additions, we thought this was an opportunity to clean up some of what was visually happening. As was mentioned by the gentleman from Landmarks West, a lot of mechanical equipment was not originally thought of being necessary, but with the advent of mechanical systems that require a lot more equipment, it actually does create more of a clutter. So this was, we thought, an interesting way to combine the kind of cleaning up of the visual clutter, creating an interior space, a volume which was more in line with the apartment that we were creating there, So, and not seeing that slight addition of the vertical wall was something that we thought was inappropriate.
And just in the context of the district, as I mentioned, I think, yes, it is bigger, but I think, understanding historically that these buildings had significantly, a number of them had visible rooftop additions or penthouses as constructed. And currently that's really part of the character of the district. And we could have included probably 3 or 4 more sheets of those views. We were trying to be selective. This is a feature of the district just based on the sheer fact of how it developed. And it's noted very clearly in the designation report. So we think that we're not creating a condition that has any sort of negative impact on the building, or certainly not on the district as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm going to start requesting to unmute you all so that we can begin our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing is closed and we'll begin the discussion. And as was presented, there are 3 components to this application: the new marquee at the entrance, the new paired double hung windows within the enlarged openings on the lot line facade, and then the expansion and raising of the penthouse walls and recladding them and changing the fenestration. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
As I looked at this originally, I had each area I had some issues with, and I think I've resolved all of them. The canopy, my concern was that, and I like the idea of conforming the shape of the canopy to the entryway and revealing the wonderful detail around the opening. And I was, as I looked at the examples they showed, I was having some difficulty figuring out why they didn't choose something that was a little more traditional. But I think I visually got over that. On the rooftop addition, I had least problems with that. I think, boy, this harkens back to what we saw this morning. You know, it is visible, but it doesn't act as a beacon on top of the building. So I'm okay with that. I struggled a little with the windows, and I guess I resolved I'm going to treat it like a secondary facade, and accept the fact that it's not going to go back to the original configuration. So I guess I'm somewhat reluctantly saying it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Thanks. I actually think that on all three counts, this really is appropriate. Number one, they've made a very compelling case, I think, for a rethinking the canopy. I mean, I think we're really used to the old canopies, and are kind of that from, you know, it's familiar to us, but it doesn't make them great. I was watching 3 Days of the Condor yesterday, and it's like 1975. It just feels really good, but it's not necessarily the best thing for everyone. So I do think that their approach to kind of having the canopy follow and scribe that the shape of that opening is a nice thing to do, and I think it can have a little bit of a contemporary design about it. I think that the rooftop sort of cleanup, despite the fact that it's a bit more kind of monolithic in terms of what we see, and the volume grows a bit, I don't think that it acts in a kind of a way that's foreign to what was there, or is jarring, or is, you know, brand new and much of a statement. So I think it's pretty modest in terms of its presentation. And I had a few kind of questions about the windows. I think the building would be fine without doubling that 1/1, but I do think it's acceptable, especially because it's repeated in that same formula further down that facade. So I think in all cases, I think that this is appropriate and approvable.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith.
I agree with most comments of my fellow commissioners. I actually think that the canopy is very beautiful, and I actually appreciate the fact that they designed something quite simple and modern that allows the original architecture to really come through. So I think that's very successful. I really don't have any problems with the window. I know we always want to bring the original window configuration back, but it is a secondary facade, and all those windows are 1/1. So I can find that acceptable as well. And the rooftop addition, I think that it will recede from view. It'll just look like a typical accretion on top of a roof. I would just want staff to make sure that they're comfortable with the color of that tile. The way it's rendered right now, the penthouse looks very white, and I know that they want to make it darker than what's there, and that's a good idea. So that's my only concern.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I really like the approach with the marquee, as several of the other commissioners have noted. It's not a solution that we might want to see everywhere, because but in a case where you have something like this with a cloth canopy, and where the door is really unusually decorative and beautiful, and the details of the front can really be exposed this way, I think it's a terrific solution that could be used in other cases where we don't have history of a historic marquee that you might want to see replicated or something of that nature. So I think that's a great solution. With regard to the windows, I'm okay with that on the secondary facade. I kind of agree with the thought of carrying it down one more window, just because as long as they're visible so that you maintain that continuity, even though that final window wouldn't be that useful perhaps, but if it's really visible as part of the pattern, I think it would be a little better. But I could have, you know, if others are fine with it, I could go along with it as presented, I guess. The rooftop, I was sort of struggling with it a bit because it's the division for me between rooftop accretions really just looking like rooftop accretions that are really trying to clean up the structure. But of course, we see a lot of these on top of buildings that look more like a structure on top of a building. And so, you know, I'm kind of two minds about that one, but I think it's okay to have the head house up there. And I guess, you know, I can see it as, you know, not inappropriate as John would sometimes say. So I think I can approve this just as it is presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. I think that this is generally a well-done application. In terms of the canopy or the marquee, I can say that, you know, I've spent a lot of time on West End Avenue and walking down West End, you really, at least I really do notice the marquees because they're relatively rare and they're very distinctive and they make for a very memorable rhythm walking down the street. And I think they're appreciated as kind of these little grace notes when you're walking down and you have all these crappy canvas canopies that get hit by the bus every 5 minutes and look like hell. And then you have this very elegant marquee. And I think it's really a nice part of the tradition of West End. It's not the norm, but there's enough of it there to justify it as an exception that will remain contextual. And I think the design here is perfectly appropriate. I think that the side window detail is becoming a Cetra Ruddy a feature. They did it on 96. I thought it came out pretty well there. And I think it's totally appropriate here. I think that the rooftop penthouse modifications is clever. It does result in an overall higher visible masonry parapet, which is a little bit problematic, but I don't think that in the end it veers away from the norm that we see on West End, which is definitely, there's plenty of penthouses. I think that Anne's comment about the color is very appropriate. We should make sure that the color is the right color. On my screen, this one looks a little pinkish. So I would say that they definitely want to study that with the staff. And I think that the choice of the tile is actually an interesting choice. Little product placement for firm and porcelanosa, a firm relationship that grows. But I think it's an interesting choice. I think it's a durable choice. And I'm interested to see how it comes out. I worry a little bit about that it might be shiny, but they can look at that with staff.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
I think the marquee is masterful. I think the rest of it is, as John would say, not inappropriate. So I can approve it.
Commissioner Chen.
Agree with the comment. I second the comment about the marquee and also what Anne said earlier about the rooftop, that the color might need adjustment, but I do believe that you will receive in the background as the part of the skill set. But I agree with the rest of the commissioners.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree with the comment as well. Having lived on West End Avenue, I do agree with what Michael Goldblum said. You walk down that street and there's like canopy after canopy. The ones that catch your eyes are the ones that are different. that have, that are intricate, have iron, that are decorative. And this is, this move is, helps the building, it liberates the entryway to the building. And it does, as others have said, show off some of the wonderful detail at the entry. And I think what's going on here it's elevating the building, which I believe all of these moves are designed to do in some way, or so it seems. So I think it's beautifully designed, very light and elegant. And I can approve that. I also think that the penthouse changes are very smart on every level. I also agree with Michael that it would be good to make sure those tiles are not shiny, but they don't add to this feeling of bulk. I do think that the addition recedes, and at the same time, it cleans up everything that's going on above above the roof line. And then finally, I think the changes to the windows on the side are perfectly acceptable. They go along with other double windows on the western facade of the building. And, just thinking practically, what's going on here is they're adding light and where possible views. I would also say that those windows should go down to the 9th floor.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Well, Mike, I would agree that all three items are appropriate, but I'll add to the chorus by saying that the marquee, I think, is an elegant, beautiful thing.
Okay, all right, great. So I think we are in a position to make a motion to approve this. And Commissioner Shamir Baran, would you make the motion? And I think at the end, let's just say that this approval is contingent upon the final review and approval of samples by staff of the cladding.
In the matter of LPC 2204-139, 393 West End Avenue, West End Collegiate Historic District Extension, a colonial revival style apartment building designed by Goldner and Goldner and built in 1927. The application is to install a marquee, modify masonry openings, and install windows and modify and enlarge a rooftop addition. I know that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the West End Collegiate Historic District Extension, and I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage, eliminate, or obscure any significant features of the building, that the marquee will be simply designed, well scaled to the entrance, and will recall in a contemporary way marquees historically found at buildings of this type, style, and age. That the materiality of the marquee, featuring dark brown metal and glass, will harmonize with the materials and details at this entrance, and its simple, clean design will allow the historic entrance to be clearly perceived. That all of the historic multi-light windows at the visible secondary facades were replaced with mostly 1/1 double-hung aluminum windows prior to designation. Therefore, an enlarged bay of pair 1/1 double-hung windows at the 10th through 16th floors of the secondary west facade will retain the same general shape and pattern found at other locations on the facade and will help to form a unified fenestration pattern. That the modest increase in height and footprint of this visible penthouse will not call undue attention to itself or significantly alter the scale or character of the large building. That the design and finishes in the modified penthouse, featuring off-white tile cladding and black finished metal window and door assemblies, will be in keeping with the varied treatment of the penthouses and other rooftop additions found throughout the historic district. That the rooftop modification will only be visible at oblique angles and from a distance at select locations from Broadway, Riverside Park, West 79th Street, West 77th Street, West 81st Street, and Riverside Drive, and that the work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building or the historic district, and that the approval will be contingent on review of the sample tile material.
There.
Yep.
Yep. We need a second.
Did you not hear me?
I didn't hear it.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Perfect.
That's approved.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the next and last item of the day, LPC 22-04971, an application for a binding report in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1111, Lot 1, Central Park, the Delacorte Theater, in the Scenic Landmark. This is an open-air theater built at the southwest edge of the Great Lawn in 1962 within an English Romantic-style public park designed in 1857 by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux. The application is to modify the shell, replace cladding, infill signage, lighting towers, seating, stairs, decking, and fencing, install a canopy and banners, and construct a barrier-free access ramp.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys. Please unmute yourself and state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Wonderful. My name is Rosalind Barber. I'm the Administrative Chief of Staff at the Public Theater. Thank you again for meeting with us today to discuss the evolution of the Delacorte renovation project. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Patrick Willingham, Executive Director of the Public Theater, along with Stephen Chu from NYC Architects and Bill Higgins from Higgins Quaysbarth. I'm also joined by my colleague, Katie Riley from New York City Parks. The public operates the Delacorte through a license agreement with the Parks Department, which is why they're joining us today. The design comprehensively addresses the theater's outstanding code and life safety needs, makes core improvements to infrastructure and backstage efficiency, and makes meaningful upgrades to support the theatrical program. We're taking an all-2 approach to this design. For more than 60 years, the Public Theater has been a cultural and artistic destination and a vibrant force for social change. Our work is driven by the belief that culture belongs to everyone, and we strive to make the Public Theater the people's theater. Each year, we employ hundreds of artists and more than 1,000 performances. We give away 160,000 free tickets and 1,500 memberships, reaching an audience of more than 380,000 from every zip code in New York City. With over 6 decades of operation serving over 6 million people, Free Shakespeare in the Park is one of New York City's most iconic cultural experiences. This year, we were proud to be among the first performing arts organizations to reopen during the pandemic with our production of Merry Wives, which you see pictured here, which served as a celebration of Black joy, laughter, and vitality. This renovation will make the Delacorte safer and more comfortable for people of all abilities, but particularly for folks with physical disabilities. It will streamline our backstage operations. You won't be seeing a lot of that in this presentation, but it's happening behind the scenes. It will revitalize the exterior for a more dynamic aesthetic experience because we know that many thousands of people enjoy our productions, but many millions enjoy walking past the Delacorte while they're walking their dogs or enjoying the park. So we want that to be a benefit for everyone. And it will also improve theatrical infrastructure, yielding higher production values, because it's a part of our mission to give to the people of the city of New York for free performances at the same quality that they might pay several $100s to see on Broadway. The Delacorte Theater is located in Central Park, which is a scenic landmark. So much of our design has taken that into account. We also want to take this moment to acknowledge the land on which the Delacorte stands, which is the original homeland of the Lenape people. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory, and we honor the generation of stewards and our respect to the many diverse Indigenous peoples that are still connected to this land. We also honor the people and legacy of Seneca Village, which is located in Central Park and was one of the earliest Black communities in New York City. So the theater, as it currently exists, is on your screen now. It's outlasted its current facility in almost every measurable way. The renovation of the Delacorte at this point is not optional, and the deteriorating structure is in dire need of rebuilding and must address the core project goals to be considered a success. This is a preview of the design that we're proposing. The design is contextual and maintains much of the Delacorte's current form. It also maintains the footprint and the views within the park while creating a contemporary design aesthetic that better reflects the natural setting, achieving all of the project goals that we outlined. Before we dive into the design, we'll share a brief history of the site and the surrounding area and the considerations that were used to inform the design. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill Higgins.
Thanks, Rosalind. Can everyone hear me? I hope. I'm Bill Higgins of Higgins Quaysbarth, and I'd just like to provide a brief discussion of some of the historical and appropriateness issues that we have all had in mind in the course of the design of this project, and that we hope will help you in your determinations of appropriateness. So I think this slide summarizes the overall character of existing and proposed. Existing is on the left, proposed is on the right. And as I hope you can see, the fundamental characteristics, in fact, more than the fundamental characteristics of the existing theater are reflected in our proposal. The existing theater is the third iteration, as you'll see when I go over history in a bit more detail, of the original 1961 design. And those iterations and the one we are also proposing maintain characteristics that make the theater what it is, and that establish its appropriate relationship to the scenic landmark of the park. There is the wood cladding, there is the semicircular shape, there is the canopy following the semicircular shape, the expression, the frank expression of lighting towers for their functional purpose, signage to express the function and the individual productions that are happening at the theater, and the landscape that surrounds the theater. We are proposing to maintain all of these things. This project proposal is a renovation. It is not a new design statement or a significant departure from the existing and previous incarnations of the theater. And we think those are quite fundamental and significant. What the attempt has been to address the many existing problems with function and with condition in a way that updates them as necessary, but that respects and continues the design that has been there since 1961. Next. So on the left with the yellow dot is the site in the 1930s at the edge of the Great Lawn that, as you can see on the right, was occupied by the theater in 1961. You can see its sort of open semi-cylindrical design, its relationship to the turtle pond that is in front of it, and its integration into the scenic character of the park. Next. This is the 1961 incarnation, if you will, of the theater. A few of the elements you can see pretty obviously. Again, that semi-cylindrical design. At this point in its history, it was clad in plywood. There has always been, from the beginning, a very frank expression of the functional lighting towers and trusses, which are obviously needed for the productions. And as I think you can see with the flags and the lights that go around the top of the semicircle, there has always been a kind of celebratory pavilion in the park character to the theater. It is one which has continued in its subsequent evolution, and which, as you'll see, we're proposing to continue with this one. Next. Part of what happens with the idea of a pavilion in the park is that there are characteristics of its structure and of its construction and of its sort of being a kind of seasonal structure that cause it to deteriorate. And that has been a problem all the way through the history of the theater. Here by the 1970s, in a way, kind of a classic New York in the 70s series of views, where the 1960s theater has already had significant deterioration and damage. And so by that kind of 20 years or a little bit less, there was substantial work that was needed to bring the theater back. Next. And that resulted in a 1976 rehabilitation. The architect for that, who was standing at the far right of the right-hand picture, was Giorgio Cavalieri, a very well-respected figure in preservation and adaptive reuse in New York. And as I think you can see, what it involved was keeping the actual fundamental structure of the theater, but redoing the seating, redoing other aspects. This next one may show this more clearly. The Cavalieri work added, for absolute functional purposes, 4 new lighting towers adjacent to the theater in the park. And again, that same kind of frank functional expression. It reclad what had been the original plywood shape with entirely new cedar. It added the projecting canopy to shelter theater goers at the base of the theater. It changed all the seats. It was, in short, a respectful continuation of the original theater in its shape, its function, basic structure, but also made quite substantial changes, all in the interest of function and longevity of the theater. And I think the Cavalieri changes started that sort of tradition, and that is precisely what the subsequent changes, including the one we're proposing today, will do. Next. Again, a reminder of that sort of celebratory nature of the theater, flags, pennants, etc. A reminder of its continuing to be an element that is very much surrounded by and nestled within its natural context, that expresses its theatrical functions, lighting particularly, very clearly. I've always kind of liked the pairing in this view of the pavilion in the foreground, which is obviously expressing 19th century function in the park, and doing it in a way that is both an expression of its own time and an expression of a celebratory public spirit, and the view of the theater to the right, which in its own language and its own time and its own function is very much expressing the same kind of thing. I think that's part of the beauty of the park and of any historic environment where expressions of varying periods are contributing to the overall environment and in their own ways doing the same thing. Next. So this is the 1990s. And at this point, the Cavalieri work of the 1970s had suffered its own difficulties and privations. And so what it has happened in this 1990s renovation by Capel and Costo is that once again, the wood cladding has been completely replaced. And also the canopy cladding has been replaced. That same functional characteristic of the lighting, I think, in addition to the lighting trusses, you're seeing those lighting and sound elements that are suspended in the foreground of the figure on the right. Again, seats are changed. Next. Oh, and I'm sorry if you can just go back. Sorry about that, Rosalind. One of the significant features all along of the evolution, including today's, is that a lot of the changes that are needed are not visible. They're happening in places like the very constrained areas underneath the seating risers, where an unbelievable amount of theatrical support function needs to happen. And it has always been a challenge to renovate those kinds of support and systems elements while maintaining the character of the theater. And again, that is part of what we are proposing to do. Next. Thanks. So here we are in today, or just about today, where the same process has been happening. And once again, we are at a point where we have issues of condition and we have issues of function. The function for strictly theatrical elements, such as lighting, those functional needs have become increasingly urgent. Not just the lighting itself, but the safety of people who are operating the lighting. Also, issues of accessibility have become extremely important. And so we are proposing a change, as Stephen Chu will show you in just a minute, that continues that, maintaining the shape and the footprint and the dimensions and the basic design and functional attitudes, while at the same time quite substantially upgrading, not only functionally, but aesthetically as well, we think, the theater. And if you could go to the next slide, Rosalind, this is just, oh, well, that's more of the story, quite dramatically told, of what has to happen underneath the theater and what a challenge it is to deal with those needs. And so a substantial amount, again, of what's proposed is not visible at all. It's happening in these concealed places. Next. I'll speed it up. So just the final, for consideration of sort of comparable projects and how the commission has dealt with them in fairly recent times. We've looked at 3 projects, 2 in Central Park and 1 in Prospect Park, that in some ways or others are comparable to what we are proposing. First of all, the 1980s rebuilding, really, of the Central Park Zoo, the 1934 Amar Embry design, replaced in the 1980s by Roche Dinkeloo. And everything you're seeing in the Roche Dinkeloo photograph on the right was completely replaced from what you see in the photograph on the left. Everything of the zoo to the west of the pathway that separates the zoo from the arsenal was entirely replaced. It was done in a vocabulary that's very friendly to the park. It was landscaped in a way that integrates it really well with the park. But the point I'd like to make is that this design, which was found appropriate by the commission, is one that represents complete replacement and redesign in a sympathetic way, but nonetheless complete redesign. The proposal you're going to see today is not one for replacement and is not one for a redesign that makes a big statement. It is really a renovation of the existing. Next. Thanks. We have the Lasker Rink from 1963 on the left, almost an exact contemporary of the Delacorte. And on the right, this is the 2019 complete replacement. Susie Rodriguez and Mitchell Jurgala working together. Again, a complete replacement, absolutely in the spirit of the park, but one which largely replaces buildings with something that reads as landscape. And again, something of that wide variety of interventions that the commission has found appropriate in the park. Next. And final, this is Woolman Rink in Prospect Park, the 1961 on the left, again, an exact contemporary of Delacorte, and the Todd Williams Billy Chen replacement of 2013 on the right. A complete replacement, one which is exciting functionally and visually. It involves, as you can see on that upper right, a quite substantial, very contemporary structure in the context of the park. And one which, again, the commission has found appropriate. So there's a broad variety, we think, in the history of what the kinds of interventions that the commission has approved. And I want to just finish by saying again that we feel that the proposal you'll see today reflects that broad variety, but also stands, frankly, on quite a conservative end of that, because it is a renovation. It is one that very much works with the existing shape and dimensions and structure of what is there now. And it's a project that I can say we're all quite proud to be presenting to the commission, and hope you will be able to find it appropriate. So Stephen Chu, I think, is next with the actual design. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. My name is Stephen Chu. I'm a design principal at Iliad Architects, and I'll be walking you through the design proposal. The revitalization of the Delacorte is an opportunity to create a more accessible, comfortable, and flexible space that can better welcome visitors and support cultural productions, all while existing in harmony with the surrounding nature of Central Park. The renovation scope I will be reviewing with you today includes the exterior wood wrapper, the canopy, the seating bowl, and associated landscape fences adjacent to the theater. Next. I'll be showing you a few closer up exterior renderings. This is the red carpet central approach to the box office. I just want to note that these renderings depict the theater during summer operational season. Okay. The design of the renovated Delacorte will have a massing that is consistent with the existing theater. In fact, the existing steel structure of the theater will remain in place, while the exterior cladding and grandstand decking will be reclad. Instead of flat clapboard siding of the existing facade, the proposed cedar wall will be vertically textured with various lengths of smaller scale solid wood cladding. The wall will play with light and shadow, changing with the sun angle, complementing the natural dappled light from the surrounding trees and foliage. Next. Here's a view from the comfort station. The red carpet approaches to the left, and you can see the box office up ahead. The exterior walls, you can see in the rendering, will be canted slightly outward from the existing footprint at grade. This gives the theater a slightly enhanced presence while giving much needed space in the seating above to achieve a more accessible layout in the grandstand. The new covered canopy and bluestone pathway will be increased to facilitate circulation and increase cover over the central box office approach. The extended canopy will help give visitors a natural understanding of the front and the main red carpet approach path to the box office, which gradually tapers back to an 8-foot cantilever at the lighting towers. Building identification will be metal shop finish letters at the edge of the canopy, as you can see here. Wayfinding is located within a discrete metal channel under the canopy soffit, with temporary seasonal signage shown in this view. Okay. I just want to give you a note that these first two renderings reflect an 18-inch tall lettering on the canopy edge. Roz, if you can point to it there. In response to feedback from community board meetings, LPC staff, and Parks Department, we have revised our design to reduce the dimensional letters on the canopy to 15 inches. So all the views shown after this will now reflect the 15-inch. This is the 18-inch. Okay. I was unable to revise these because they were rendered, and we revised all the rest of them. So you will see the difference. Next. This is a view from the Great Lawn. The new lighting towers are shown here, replacing the existing, utilizing the same foundations and footings. There will be seasonal banners deployed at these 4 lighting positions, here, here, and there are 2 on house right. Next. You can see the lighting position there as well. That's the 4th. We have actually hidden a view of the tree, see the circle on the lawn in this rendering, just to give you a clearer sense of the building behind. You can see in the lower right is the actual photo with the tree right there. Okay. The evenings in the park can be very dark, and to assist with wayfinding, we are proposing a hint of uplighting on the textured wood exterior, a subtle gesture that will be seen through the foliage and the existing treescape. The lettering will not be internally or externally lit. The pedestrian path will be downlit from recessed lighting flush with the wood soffit and washed with continuous cane rail along the base of the wood wall. It will provide additional lighting along the circulation to increase safety for audience members approaching the box office and make it easier for the staff to assist in directing theater goers. The materials are consistent with those found in other Central Park buildings: natural wood, cedar for exterior walls, painted steel for ornamental metals, and we are exploring both solid wood and treated wood. Cabanine is one of the products that we're looking at, which has been used at various New York City parks and recreation facilities. The treatment does base itself on a pine that's sustainably grown and harvested. It does increase strength, stability, and weather resistance. The maintenance and the durability is very important in this situation, as this will all be exposed all the time to the exterior. Standing seam zinc is being proposed for the cladding of the canopy. That is what exists currently on the canopy. The wood and zinc will age and weather naturally. Slight changes in tone are expected and welcome. Next. I'm going to walk you through some plans and elevations. This is a site plan. We are not expecting any significant impact to the surrounding trees. Pruning will be required, which usually occurs on an annual basis. Next. Here you can see a plan of the existing and proposed pathway. The bluestone pathway will be increased 10 feet at the center axis and taper back to the 8 feet at the pole locations on the right and left. The increased dimension will give theater goers proper space to approach the box office and move either right or left with the assistance of wayfinding staff. The existing bluestone pattern will be retained and extended outward in the proposed plan. Another note, we did review the critical root zones with John Dillon of Central Park Conservancy, and the assessment was that the proposed paving plan would not negatively impact the surrounding trees. There is one tree which is off right to the center path, the center path, right there, yes, which is the one that is affected by the increase. And after looking at it on site, it does appear that the drip line is beyond the increase of the pathway, which is the important critical root zone. Next. Here you can see an existing and proposed plan of the canopy. As you can see, the canopy is being increased at the central portion of the plan to give cover for the increased path below. We do taper back to the existing lighting positions, as those will be retained as the same locations. Next. Here's an elevation unwrapped in a side elevation where you can perceive the cant angle on the lower left. The increase in the facade will be a 2-foot height increase, and I will explain that to you when we get to the building section. Next. I do want to speak to you about the proposal for improving accessibility. It is a big piece of the renovation here. Here's an existing plan of the Delacorte. There's only one ADA access point at the current theater, and it's house right up a ramp to the front row of seating. This provides up to 15 or 16 spots, which is the minimum code requirement or ADA spot requirement. But we do not have access to house left on the other side and no access to the central aisle, One other thing I want to point out in this plan is over the years of renovations and changes, seats were added to that cross aisle, which you can see in this plan. So for those of you who've been to the theater at intermission and at the end of the show, there's always a bottlenecking there because you're forced into those locations of stairs and there's no through path along that entire cross aisle, no accessibility to it either. Next. Here's a plan of the proposed, and you can see the first thing that we were doing is rebuilt the ramps on house right and left to bring accessibility to the front row and to the cross aisle at both house right and left. We've taken all the seats out of that, and in fact, we're looking at the entire seating plan to slightly increase the seat widths because some of them can be quite tight. You can also see here in the yellow zone at the back, yes, by canting the wall slightly outward from its base, we're able to achieve the dimension to add another row of seating. This helps make up for many of the lost seats in taking out the cross aisle and slight increases in seat width. We will not reach the existing seat count, but we will be close to it. I will also add that this proposal, in fact, that number has just been increased. We are up to 34 ADA positions from the existing 15 or 16. The other things about accessibility, the lower right, we are providing an elevator lift that goes from grade up to the control booth and mixing position above. And in addition, we are looking at providing at least 2 means of access onto the stage via permanent lifts. So that's something we're still investigating and coordinating structurally, but the goal is to get 2 means stage left and right up to stage. I will add that it's not included in these drawings, but we are providing accessible dressing rooms, restrooms, and showers, which don't exist currently. Here's a rendering of the existing and the proposed ramp as being reconfigured. Okay, exterior canopy, yes. Next. Here you can see some views of the existing lettering and facade. The Delacorte Theater is the permanent lettering in the upper left attached to the wood facade. Often every season, production-related signage changes, and it's typically mounted to the wall at various locations. This changes seasonally without designated locations and therefore feels a bit ad hoc and random. Next. We looked at existing signage in the park. There are numerous examples of contemporary signage elements that are celebratory and integrated with architecture of the structures and spaces. Banners are often deployed on lampposts and poles throughout the park. Next. Here you can see some details of the proposed signage elements. A 15-inch tall metal lettering repeats itself 3 times around the curving canopy. You can see that below in the elevation. And a detail of it up above on the right. And yes, right there. Okay, the permanent signage is indicated in blue in this diagram, which is designation for wayfinding. And you can see the gate numbers down below. The gate numbers are in fact recessed wood into the texture. They're not applied, they're not painted. They're actually built into the detailing of the wood texture. Okay. The removable signage related, the removable production related signage are indicated in green here. That includes the banner on the left, which is attached to the 4 lighting poles, the horizontal band 18 inches tall. You can see that again in elevation, at the box office and concessions. Okay, and then finally, the removable licensee signage, free Shakespeare in the Park is indicated in pink, and that is down below as well. Removable signage content and installation dates are negotiated each year with the parks based on proposed playing season subject to terms of license agreement. Here are some examples of seasonal graphics by Pentagram. The font was developed for the Public Theater Identity by Paula Shear, who has also designed branding and font for the Parks and Recreation, New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. She did an iconic leaf symbol, and that's gone through their comprehensive brand system. Next. This slide illustrates the total proposed signage versus the permanent signage on the right. There's two views on the left, up and down, and then the permanent on the right. You can see how the different signage serves different purposes. When the public is operating the theater, the signage shares union-required information, provides general passersby a programming content within the theater, and gives a sense of welcoming to all those that visit. The signage is colorful and changes every year. The permanent signage you see on the right is the wayfinding in the channel and the Delacorte theater designation above. These all reflect 15-inch tall lettering on the canopy edge. Okay, next. Sorry, let me just take a, excuse me. Here are a few exterior details. The wall section on the lower right reflects in red line the existing wall section of the Delacorte and the proposed overlay. As you can see here, with the slight cant outward, we're able to achieve another seating row. The increase in height reflects the step seating need to step up for that last row. On the left, you can see that the detail of this lettering at the signage, the lettering at the canopy edge is removable, is located on standoffs, and can be taken off with mechanical fasteners. The canopy will house flush lighting, which will graze the wood facade, and a crane rail at the base, as you can see on the lower right. Next. Okay, tickets and concessions windows. This addresses all the openings in the facade down at the pedestrian level. You can see for the two box office and concessions windows, we have adjusted the counter heights to meet ADA counter height accessibility standards. We are proposing here that we would be adding flush wood infill panels, which could be removed and stored during performance season. And we're adding operable windows for the staff comfort and security. In front of the windows, we are also asking for a roll down shutter, which will be used during the season in the evenings for security purposes. The accessibility will be addressed for the patrons in front, as well as the staff and the operators behind in the back of house. Okay, the lighting towers. Here is a plan and photos of the existing lighting positions, 1 through 6. 1 and 6 flank the stage, 2, 3, 4, and 5 face the park outward. And there's a photo on the left. Next. The proposed lighting tower revisions will address safety and operations for the lighting towers. Challenges are to increase structural capacity in the pole, add fall arrest equipment, and also make it easier for operators to hoist equipment up, work up there and position and mount their lighting positions. As you can see in the lower left, the plan has been revised to have a straight line as opposed to the circle. The circle is attractive in our opinion, but the straight line does give a more direct and efficient approach for lighting the stage. The circle actually has some lighting conflicts when you start to mount them around the bends. As you can see, the proposed revisions retain the existing height of the existing lighting towers. Next. At lighting towers 1 and 6 flanking the stage, we are requesting to increase those up to the height of 2 through 5. So they would all be at the same existing height. Next. Here's a rendering to show you the existing versus the proposed on the right. Next. The seating. In contrast to the existing monochromatic color scheme, the new seats will be a blend of colors that complement the colors of the changing seasonal foliage through the year. Next. The fences are deteriorating and already reinforced at various locations. This plan illustrates the extent of fencing adjacent to the Delacorte in yellow, the yellow line. The blue indicates the steel operable existing gates. You can see images on the left of the existing fencing. Next. The proposed fencing will be 7'6" tall with vertically textured wood to match the aesthetics of the theater cladding. On the right, you can see a comparison of the existing fence versus the proposed. At many locations, there is a fence, in fact, built behind the existing fence. We are going to clean it up, have one fence at 7.6. We are proposing that the upper portion retain a porosity, which would recall the porosity in the existing horizontal slatting. But we do think it should be solid below to hide some of the unsightly equipment that often gets placed behind. Next. Views at gate 1 and 4. Next. Okay, finally, I'd like to share with you a few select view sheds of the theater from various points in the park. Okay. We are comparing existing views, summer and winter on the left, versus proposed summer and winter on the right. We've taken the existing photo and used Photoshop to put in the massing of the new proposal on the right. Here you can see that it's really not perceptible. You do see minimally the lighting tower there, which would be increased height. Next. This is a view from the red carpet approach, existing on the left, proposed on the right. I will point out that the big lighting position there, center, is going to be retained. It will remain existing. Here you can see that because the canopy is actually tilting up slightly, you don't see the top of it as much from this vantage point, but otherwise the massing is consistent. You don't perceive the cant from this angle. Next. Here's a view from the Great Lawn. The massing really doesn't change the subtle cant you can perceive, but really not much of a difference in terms of overall effect to the site. This is from the south of the Great Lawn. Again, you're at a distance that really can't be perceived. Next. Here's a view from across Turtle Pond. And here you can see the change in seat color, and I think noticeably the change in rail and guardrail color. The white does stand out quite a bit. And finally, the view from the Belvedere Castle looking down. And you can see the seat color change as well as a slight increase there of lighting positions 1 and 6 through the treescape. And that's completes our design proposal presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for a detailed presentation. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, Commissioner Chapin, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is an unrelated question of sorts, but I was wondering if there is a proposal to do something about the comfort station. I know that's not within your purview, but since you're working closely with the Conservancy and Parks Department, I wondered if there was a plan for upgrading that at this point.
Yes, that's a great question. As you noted, the comfort station isn't a part of our license agreement, but obviously it's related to the function of this facility. So we have been in conversation with Central Park Conservancy and the Parks Department about the renovation of the comfort station on the same timeline as the theater itself, with the hope to increase ADA capabilities as well as the number of fixtures within the comfort station.
Thank you. That would be great.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Question about the fence and to a lesser extent the siding. Since you're using solid cedar, basically studs or boards, heavy, thick boards, are they going to curl up over time? Start to go like this?
Stephen, can you answer that question? Yes, I can. Commissioner Goldblum, we are looking at solid cedar. I do want to say that the material that we're looking at, we're also in fact looking at potentially reclaimed wood. These are options that we're studying technically. They are relatively short pieces. They're not really long, wide pieces that project, so that their stability, and they will be locked one against each other. So there's sticks that will be laid continuously. Their projection at the moment, we're looking at around 3.5 inches is the greatest projection, and the least is about 2 inches. The thickness of the wood that I'm looking at is 2 inches as well. So it's not a thin piece on one side and it's more thick on the other. And we are looking at ways of locking it together, but I'm not that concerned about that happening due to the fact that they're not really fin-like in terms of their proportions.
And on the fence where they're kind of just standing up by themselves?
They will have backing on the back side at various points horizontally that will brace them. And those are proposed to be a shallower depth. So they're basically smaller members that will be locked against each other like slatting.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Commissioner Chapin, did you have another question?
Yes, just on the seating, thinking about patrons, you're widening the seats. Do you have a design for the seat? Is it very similar to the current one, or are there any plans to, you didn't, show any examples, so I don't know if it's just basically the same seat, only wider, or is there a plan on that at all?
Yeah, Stephen, can you speak to that? Yeah, we are working with our theater consultant to hone in on an actual specified seat. We are looking for a similar type of seat. It's not exactly the same as the one that's there. There are lots of new seats out there that have better mounting conditions, are more durable, but in terms of their materials, they would be similar in that they're not natural materials. They're basically plastic type seats that will be weather resistant. The actual spec of the seat we will provide when we develop up to the next level of design and give you the proposal and specification for it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
Yes, the color of the canopy, as you see on the screen, that's based on it's not based on nature, but it's based on what's architecturally about the color that we selected there. What does it relates to?
Should I just take that, Rosalind?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson, are you referring to the wood? Or are you referring to what element of the canopy were you?
It is right now in what we have on the screen.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You see the color, the planks that are going into perspective.
Oh, the soffit wood.
Golden color, they look golden to me.
Yes, the wood soffit in this case. The reason the color, and again, I will have to say that it is a rendering. So when we actually have the wood, I will show you the real thing. But that is basically going to take on it is natural wood, it's real wood, but it will look different because it won't have the sun and the weathering effect on it. The rendering depicts a facade that has had some weathering. So you see the natural graying occurring on the vertical face of the wood, and underside of wood tends to retain its more natural tone without the weathering. So there will be a difference in the look.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, other questions? Okay, I don't see questions right now. So we'll move to public testimony, and we may have more questions afterward. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And always we'll start with anyone, as always, we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to everyone else. So I will now turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take you through the testimony. And just one note, whether you signed up in advance or not, please raise your hand so that she can find you as she works through the sign-in sheet.
All right, thank you. So first I'll be calling on Council Member Gail Brewer. Council Member, you should be receiving a request from me. All right, I see that you are rejoining as a panelist. All right, Council Member Brewer, I just need for you to please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this. I am Gail Brewer. I am the council member for the 6th District for the Upper West Side, Clinton, and Central Park. And I am testifying in support of this proposal to renovate Delacorte Theater. It's an 1,800 seat open air theater. 1962 it was built and is beloved by an audience that has seen, any of the extraordinary productions staged by the theater. I have waited in line for a ticket, had the honor of enjoying the productions, and addressed the audience as an elected official, and toured the below seating area spaces that desperately need renovation. I know that the public theater had a larger theater proposal, but after discussion with the Central Park Conservancy and others, to their credit, they went back to the drawing board and you've seen the proposal. Accolades are coming from everyone, the Conservancy, the Parks Department, community boards, Municipal Art Society, Landmarks Conservancy, and others. I know that the area where the actors prepare for their roles on stage is being upgraded, and boy, does it need it for restrooms and dressing rooms. Right now they dodge puddles and it'll be ADA compliant. I think the government has contributed $42 million. I put in a little bit of your taxpayer funds and I'm proud to do so. I just want to pick up on what Diana Chapin said about the restrooms. It is my understanding that there will be collaboration between Parks, Conservancy, and the theater. And I think that any new public bathrooms will benefit all of us who have to wait in line at intermission now, as well as the public. So that's a great thing. And I'm sure they'll be asking me for money, and I will do the best I can. I want to congratulate everyone who's been involved in the planning for the renovation of the Delacorte Theater. I'm pleased to add my support. And I just know that Joe Papp is looking down at us and smiling. Thank you very much.
All righty, thank you, Councilmember Brewer. Next, I will be calling on Kay Carpin from Manhattan Community Board 7. All right, Kay, you should be receiving a request from me. Okay, Kay, I see that you are in the meeting. Please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Kay Carpin from Community Board 7. We find this proposal to be appropriate both from the aesthetic point of view, but also from the point of view of safety and accessibility. We're further want to thank the presenters for their care and creativity and thoughtfulness of the proposals and their responsiveness to some of our questions and suggestions. And so therefore, we want to applaud the renovation in every respect. We believe it's going to fit comfortably and attractively within this jewel that is Central Park. And we believe it's a restoration that's appropriate to the character of the park and also will bring years of joy and enhanced comfort for all of those who love free Shakespeare in Central Park. And we'll just want to say, may flights of angels speed you in your work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I see here I have Sam Watterson signed up to speak. I think you are Sam W, so I'm going to promote you as panelist. And if you are not Sam Watterson, you can go ahead and deny it. All right. Okay, I see you've accepted my request. Please just state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Sam Waterston, and I'm an actor. At the Delacorte, 1 year after it opened, I had my first speaking part on a New York stage. Appearing under the stars in the heart of Central Park, in the heart of the one and only New York City, is an unforgettable experience, one I've been lucky enough to repeat often over the years, both as an audience member and as an actor. Thank you for the chance to advocate now for the renovation of this extraordinary place. The Delacorte has been a big part of my life. I met my wife-to-be as I was rehearsing there to play Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing, which led some 32 years later to our daughter Elizabeth, who was playing Hero in another production of the same play in the same theater in the park with me as her father, Leonardo. For 40 odd years, I was in every production of Hamlet there. I have decades of work to be grateful to the Delacorte for, obviously, but I also know pretty well by now how this theater works for performers, how that most New York of all New York audiences responds, and the unique place the Delacorte holds in New York City's life. It's magic. People come to it from every borough, from every corner of the park, the country, and the world, on foot. You can feel the belonging, the theater to them and to the city, and they to it. It's a true, communal, thoroughly urban joint venture, a key part of our common culture. There's nothing like it. That's the Delacorte, a place for magic in a magic setting overlooked by Belvedere Castle, discreetly tucked into Vox and Olmsted's grand Central Park design. At the end of 60 years, it needs renovation. Renovation, preservation, reinvigoration in fulfillment of Joe Papp's original vision, to be made truly and equitably accessible to all, and to be made more weather resilient in the face of a changing climate. Like the public theater itself, the Delacorte has always been about accessibility, equity, and theater for all. This plan will cement that mission for generations to come. The Delacorte has fully earned its place here. It's up to us now to fully realize this proposed plan. I urge you to join me in supporting this investment in the Delacorte. It will uplift us all, give our grandchildren and great-grandchildren a place to find Shakespeare in the heart of the city themselves, and even to show what they have to give back. Let's invest in easier access for everyone, resilience in a changing climate, and a great experience made young. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, I will be calling on Gail Papp. Okay, Gail, you should be receiving a request from me to rejoin the meeting as a panelist. All right, Gail, I see you are rejoining the meeting as a panelist. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Right there?
Yes, you are. We can hear you and we can see you, Gail.
Yeah, good. My name is Gail Papp. I was the former director of play development at the Public Theater, and I'm happy to be here today to support the much needed renovation of the Delacorte Theater in Central Park. When my husband, Joe Papp, founded the New York Shakespeare Festival and Shakespeare in the Park in the 1950s, it was on the basic principle that art belonged to everyone, irrespective of class, caste, and color. He passionately believed that Shakespeare wasn't the property of people who had money or who had education or were born here. Shakespeare was the property of all New Yorkers, he said, and it was his job and that of his colleagues to make it accessible in every sense of that word. Joe's founding vision is continued today by the Public Theater's distribution throughout the city's 5 boroughs of free tickets to all of its productions in Central Park. And in recent years, by involving the people of the city of New York, not only as audience members, but also as participants in its wonderful public works pageants. The proposed renovation of the Delacorte Theater will take another step in the journey of the theater's accessibility from the time it was built in 1962 by making it ADA compliant and by adding infrastructure for both cultural workers and audience members that will support access for people with disabilities to its onstage, backstage, and audience areas. In addition, the renovation will make the location more welcome for people who have never visited Central Park or the theater, with easy to read and cheerful signage. The proposed design will also make the Delacorte Theater more convenient to locate in its natural setting, using colors and materials chosen to help the building nestle within the surrounding environment. Finally, the Delacorte Theater is an experience unlike any other in the city, a special place, as Joe imagined it, of inspiration, beauty, and democratic commingling under the stars. I urge you to join me in supporting the renovations that will enhance that experience, building on Joe's legacy to make Shakespeare truly accessible for everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, I will be calling on Sharifa Ali. Okay, Sharifa, you should be receiving a request from me to rejoin the meeting as a panelist. Okay, Sharifa, I see you've accepted my request. Please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sharifa Ali. I'm a former Public Works Community Coordinator and the current Director of Artistic Projects at the New Group, as well as a faculty member at Princeton University. I'm joining you all from Harlem, Manhattan, the unceded lands of the Lenni Lenape peoples, and I'm here to publicly testify in support of the long overdue plans to renovate the Delacorte Theater. For nearly 60 years now, this trailblazing institution has provided millions of New Yorkers and visitors alike with the transformative experience that is free Shakespeare in the Park. The public theater has always centered access and equity in everything that they do by creating meaningful community bonds in every borough of the city and doing the challenging but incredibly rewarding and necessary work of fostering radical inclusion, radical hospitality across every sector of society. During my time working at the Public, supporting the Public Works program, which engages non-professional actors alongside professional ones for workshops and performances, I saw this every day. The notions of equity and access are rooted in free Shakespeare in the Park, a bold idea that has now, after 6 decades, become a New York tradition. However, 6 decades is a long time for any institution to go without significant upgrades to its facilities, and time for long overdue renovation has come. The Delacorte structure has deteriorated, creating uncomfortable conditions for staff, artists, and audiences alike. It lacks modern back-of-house theatrical operations and does not ensure equitable access for those living with disabilities. This proposed plan will change all of that, adding accessible and comfortable spaces for audiences and artists, streamlined backstage operations, and improved comfort for cast and crew, improved signage for an enhanced wayfinding experience. I've had lots of stories in that regard. For many of the people that I've worked with through the Public Works program, being in a show at the Public was the very first time that many of them had ever visited the Delacorte, let alone Central Park. I know that the improved signage will go a long way towards making New Yorkers from all life circumstances feel included and welcome in this iconic cultural offering. I hope that you'll join me and the countless New Yorkers who've all experienced the marvels of the Delacorte Theater over the years in supporting this plan to renew a beloved institution that has given us so much joy. Cultural venues are our city's lifeblood, as we know, especially in times like these. And now is the time to fully invest in the Delacorte so that it can best serve everyone for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, I have Lori Beckelman. But Lori, I do not see you here. If you're in the meeting, Lori, and you're using a different name, can you please just raise your hand so that I can identify you? In the meantime, I will call on Andrea Goldwyn. All right, Andrea, you'll be receiving a request from me. Okay, Andrea, I see that you have rejoined and you are now in the meeting. Please just state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good day, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Andrea Goldwyn, speaking on behalf of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. The Conservancy's Public Policy Committee has reviewed this proposal and supports it with a minor comment below. The committee believes that this design is appropriate as it largely follows the existing building in form and materials. It will reuse the steel frame, maintaining the distinct circular profile, but not copying the original. New wood cladding and fencing are in the manner of today's Delacorte. Newly colorful seating will enhance the visitor experience. The proposal should succeed in its programmatic goals of upgrading infrastructure, expanding accessibility, and modernizing theater systems. Most of all, this proposal maintains the relationship between the structure and the landscape that surrounds it. With this new plan, the Delacorte will retain its unique presence while still deferring to Central Park, one of New York's most important landmarks. The committee did note that the new signage program, will have a strong impact. They suggest minimizing it where possible and creating more differentiation between the Delacorte Theater sign and other public theater signage. We thank the project team for their clear and thorough presentation, and thank you for the opportunity to express the Conservancy's views.
Alrighty, thank you. Okay, next I have Sean Corsandi from Landmark West. Sean, you'll be receiving a request from me right now. Okay, Sean, I see that you're rejoining now as a panelist. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee appreciates that today's presentation recognizes the 1977 Delacorte Theater's original architect, Giorgio Calvieri. Calvieri was an architect, friend of Joe Papp, and one-time president of both MAS and the New York AIA. He is also integral to the history of the Delacorte, which began as a seasonal venue and has only grown in prominence. Despite the success, the building, undoubtedly an intrusion into the scenic landmark, has paid respect to its context through a quiet existence as a background building. Without debating the significance of the amazing productions, the quality of the artistry, the respected stature of the public theater, or even the many laudable life safety, accessibility, and visitor comfort improvements deftly designed and presented today, the sum of these alterations flip the modernist background building to the foreground, creating an immediate Instagrammable moment. Our committee feels this approach misreads the very place of the Delacorte, which it has held for decades, and its role in the park. One that was reinforced in 1998 when the Landmarks Commission voted to restore the existing modern style structure rather than replace it as proposed today. Arguably, the current proposal harkens to nature with its bark-like skin, but flips the tree stump into a bowl with canted walls. Just because you can't, should you? The committee was also perplexed by certain aspects. While we agree the light towers should be safer for stage crew, must they all be raised to the same height? We never had a clear explanation on this, and it defies the physics of lighting design. While we agree new seats may be more comfortable, the Delacorte is consistently running full house shows. Unlike the dappled seats of the pandemic attendance-restricted Tokyo Olympic Games, which needed to appear occupied for NBC broadcasts, maintaining the current green would be less of a visual impact on the context when viewed from the Belvedere, so named for its beautiful view, year-round. And most importantly, while we don't want anyone lost in the park, our committee felt that the Times Square signage to be excessive in scale and quantity. It does not add to the audience experience, but rather detracts from the passive experience from the others in the park. Landmark West supports the Delacorte and the public theater, but we hope that these issues can be addressed in discussion. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Next, I have Lori Beckelman. Okay, Lori, you're going to be receiving. Let's see, how can I? Okay, Lori, I am bringing you in. I believe that you can unmute by hitting *6 for Zoom, so you're able to talk. Okay, Lori, if you just hit *6, it should unmute you and you should be able to talk in the meeting.
It's *9.
Is it *9? Okay.
It
Lori, you can try *9. All right. Okay, maybe just try *9 one more time, and if not, I can come back to you.
Yeah, I think, Sasha, you were correct with *6. *9 is to
*6, yeah. I think *9 is when you raise your hand.
It looks like she's unmuted now. Lori, are you able to speak?
Yeah, I see talking permitted, so I assume you are not muted.
Sasha, perhaps we'll skip to the next one.
All right.
If we could work that out.
Okay, Lori, we'll come back to you. Next, I'll be calling on Gordon Davis. Gordon, you'll be receiving a request from me. Okay, Gordon, I see you have rejoined the meeting as a panelist, so you should be able to unmute your mic, please, and state your name for the record. You can turn on your camera if you wish. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Can you see me and can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Gordon Davis. I'm a partner at Venable LLP, a law firm. I'm a long-term member of the board of the Public Theater, and I'm also secretary of the board. In a prior life, I was the Parks Commissioner of New York City and one of the founding trustees of the Central Park Conservancy. So many of the speakers before have said almost everything I might want to say, except to be clear, I'm speaking for the public, not for the Central Park Conservancy, although I am on both boards. But I do want to emphasize that what you've seen has been reviewed in detail by the Central Park Conservancy and by the Parks Department, and their input has affected these designs rather significantly. I suppose I've been involved with Central Park and the Public Theater for about the same time. One of my first meetings as a Parks Commissioner was with Joe Papp and Giorgio Cavalieri, and they came to propose a temporary canopy over the Delacorte for evenings when it might be inclement. And they wanted me to consider it. And I noticed that the temporary canopy was held up by very substantial columns going down in the park about 15 feet. So I said, not right now, maybe later, and sent them away. More recently, I raised that anecdote because more recently, when the public started to look at the Delacorte again in the last 3 years, one of the first issues we talked about or considered was whether technology advanced enough that there could be some kind of canopy that was like some of the stadium canopies could be put up in inclement weather and brought back, or some structure like that, whether the technology had gotten that far. And it became clear after a year or so that such a structure and the kind of total structure that would result from it was not appropriate and not fitting for the park or for the public, actually. And at that point, we started back at basics, which is the existing footprint, the existing bowl, the existing seating, how it fits in the park, all the basics you've seen in this current design. That basically it's not a new design, it's not a new building or a new design. It's one that is essentially to upgrade the basic working systems of the building. I don't have that much to add to what you've seen before, but just a practical point, which I think Gail Brewer made earlier. She made a number of them, as did Commissioner Chapin, starting with the bathroom. I'm glad that issue has been addressed. But you know, if you have any official capacity, you stand near the Delacorte before a performance, there are a series of questions you always get, which is, where is it? How do I get in? Where do I get my ticket? How do I get to my seat? Are there any railings? What's the seat feel like? And so on and so forth. Very practical questions that we all considered in thinking about this, the project that you see before you. I think it answers a lot of those questions, not completely, but in a better answers than there were before. And with that, I think I'll stop. And if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Alrighty, thank you. Lara Varielli from Friends of the Upper East Side, you'll be receiving a request from me. Lara, to rejoin the meeting. Okay, I see that you're in the meeting now. Please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, this is Laura Varielli, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and Honorable Commissioners, Central Park is one of New York City's largest and most beloved landmarks. And Friends appreciates the city's effort to improve every element of the park by making it more accessible and inclusive. We do recognize the urgent need for updates at the Delacorte Theater and understand the challenges of working with an open-air structure. The proposed cedar cladding recalls the original shell of the theater while giving the structure an updated and welcoming look. However, the outward taper facade is more akin to a modern sports arena than an amphitheater, and while it doesn't increase the building's actual footprint, it is incongruent with its history, purpose, and location. Friends Preservation Committee is deeply concerned about the overall branding approach of this proposal. Originally constructed as a simple and unobtrusive structure, the existing theater blends in the landscape and slowly reveals itself to park and theater goers. The 4 15 feet tall banners are excessively large and unnecessary, a jarring addition to this unpretentious theater. While we are not opposed to the material change of the proposed awning, its bulging shape reinforces the sports arena appearance and clashes with the structure's footprint. Still on the branding issue, Friends would like to remind the applicant and commissioners that this is the Delacorte Theater and not the public Shakespeare in the Park Theater. The proposed 1 feet 6 inches tall 3D letters of the licensee signage, albeit removable, are outright inappropriate, and the Delacorte should not be an afterthought when it comes to branding this building. Finally, we're not opposed to the other aspects of this proposal, such as the alterations to the utilitarian lights, seating, stairs, decking, and fencing. We urge the applicant to work with the commission and come back with a scaled-back proposal that is more respectful of the theater and park's history, setting, and importance. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, I will be calling on Christabel Goff. Christabel, you should be receiving a request from me to rejoin the meeting as a panelist, so you're able to unmute your mic. Okay, Christabel, I see that you are now a panelist, so you should be able to unmute your mic, please, and state your name for the record. You can turn on your camera if you wish. You have 3 minutes to speak. Okay, I see you are.
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you. Christabel Goff, speaking for the Society for the Architecture of the City. Theater historians tell us it was for an amphitheater open to the sky that Shakespeare wrote, "The moon shines bright. In such a night as this, stood Dido with a willow in her hand upon the wild sea banks and waft her love to home again at Carthage." When Joe Papp and Giorgio Cavalieri and George Delacorte turned their backs on Broadway and created Shakespeare in the Park, it was an historic restoration on a scale that no one even imagines today. They were reproducing, in the essentials, the original setting for Elizabethan drama. The lines, "In such a night as this," were first spoken around 1598 in London in the open air, in front of a wooden playhouse whose exact dimensions we hardly know. When Shakespeare was 34 years old and New York City did not yet exist. But the Greek tradition of a stage open to the sky is far older, of course, going back to the 5th century BC. The revised design for the front of the Delacorte is retro, but perhaps travels back in time to the wrong place. It looks mid-century modern, with its bright lights, big lettering, and canted walls. It could be selling hot dogs on a secondary highway to outer nowhere. Not right in the heart of a great metropolis, not right for an historic park, and certainly not to replace tangible evidence of an intellectual movement of importance in the theater world. The Delacorte is already a destination. All it really needs is faithful restoration of Giorgio Cavalieri's fine original design, and of course, perhaps improved wheelchair access, although I see that the number of seats hasn't increased very much. The Delacorte was a gift to the city, which, as was the Naumburg bandshell in 1989, nonprofit bureaucrats planned to demolish and rebuild. The Landmarks Preservation Commission approved demolition of the Naumburg, but it didn't happen. In 1993, the New York Times reported the court ruling that the city could not demolish the bandshell because its administrative code prohibited destruction of a gift. Mark will look at this. In any case, thank you for hearing me. And I would also join people who called for no change in the color of the seats. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, Laurie Beckelman will try again. You should be receiving a request from me to rejoin the meeting. Hold on. Okay, Laurie. I see you are rejoining as a panelist. Now let's try. Please just unmute your mic. You can turn on your camera if you wish and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes. Okay, I think, all right, I see you. I don't know if we can hear you, Laurie. Oh, Laurie, I think, did you give it access to your microphone? Because we can't hear you, but we can see you. Let me see. All right, I see that you have unmuted your mic, Laurie. For some reason, we can't hear you. No, we still can't hear you. We can see you, we just can't hear you. All right. Let's see.
Sasha, I think you could skip to the next person while we try and figure this out.
All right.
I don't know if somebody can call her and see if we can provide technical expertise.
Yeah, we've been trying. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Next, I will call on Franklin Richards from Office of Councilmember Keith Powers' office. All right, I see that you've accepted my request. All right, Franklin, I just need for you to please unmute your mic. You can turn on your camera if you wish and state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Franklin Richards. I'm with Councilmember Keith Powers' office, and I'm here to read a testimony on his behalf. Dear Chair Carroll, I am writing to you to publicly voice my strong support of the plans to renovate the Delacorte Theater. The Public Theater has long been one of our city's greatest cultural treasures, producing iconic works and bringing together communities and reflecting the voice of every neighborhood and borough of New York City. To put it simply, the Delacorte is a piece of New York City's history and a crucial piece of our city's cultural fabric. Now, after 6 decades of pioneering some of Shakespeare's greatest works for millions of audience members, the time has come for essential renovations to ensure it is a venue that can continue to best serve everyone. The design before you has carefully and thoughtfully incorporated elements to make it more equitable, sustainable, and successful for the next 6 decades and beyond. First and foremost, the design will deliver critical accessibility improvement that will impact both audiences and artists. Its inadequate accessibility has been too burdensome for people with disabilities for far too long. Improving wayfinding will enhance the experience of arriving at the Delacorte, helping both first-time visitors and long-time patrons alike better navigate the venue. The use of new sustainable materials that better blend in with the surroundings at Central Park will help the structure's interior, exterior better weather the elements for years to come. In sum, this is a plan that provides boundless community benefits for every New Yorker and restores our commitment to the city's public spaces and cultural venues. I am proud to stand with my fellow elected officials, community members, and New Yorkers in supporting this design. A revitalized Delacorte will herald a new golden era for the performing arts in our city after what has been a challenging time in our city's history. Sincerely, Keith Powers, New York City Council, Majority Leader, District 4.
All right, thank you. Next, John Graham, you'll be receiving a request from me. John, I'm calling on you to rejoin. All right, John, I see you've accepted my request. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Okay, John.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the VSNY. We, the public and the Commission, have a responsibility to look critically at any proposal to reconstruct a facility in one of our scenic landmarks, whose origins do not lie in the historic design of the park and do not follow the landscape design principles of the original plan. The Delacorte Theater, one of the most significant intrusions in the park, is in this category. Heroic efforts over more than 150 years have kept most inappropriate facilities out of Central Park. Whether they were proposals for private gain or supposed public benefit, they have in common the carving out of space for specialized groups or uses, often with a physical form detrimental to the park's romantic, picturesque style, and its intended use as a year-round democratic pleasure ground. As early as 1916, another proposal for a Shakespeare Festival in Central Park was met with strong resistance, the Times calling it a park invasion. That plan was defeated. There was a different outcome with the Delacorte in 1960. This was a period, the low point in our understanding and stewardship of Olmsted and Fox's work, which also gave us Kate Woolman Rink and Prospect Park and Alaska Rink in Central Park. Even so, the Parks Commissioner Robert Moses publicly and rather viciously fought with Joe Papp, founder of the New York Shakespeare Festival, over summer performances in the park, which were managed at that time with temporary stages. And there was there was enough public concern about the effects on the view from the pond at the base of Vista Rock and Belvedere Castle that the central light tower of the new permanent theater was relocated to a slightly less intrusive position. The Commission should ask the following questions. Would this facility be found appropriate if it didn't already exist? Assuredly not. Although it was present at designation, its complete reconstruction amounts to a new structure. 2, does it make sense to carve out a facility used for a small fraction of the year, but which occupies and visually intrudes into the landscape every day of the year? 3, are there other possible locations and facility designs within Central Park which would provide a similar experience, yet be less destructive on the historic landscape and aesthetic values of the park? Finally, how does the proposal mitigate the intrusive nature of the current structure? It doesn't. In fact, it exacerbates it with an unnecessary and excessive amount of signage and by assertively canting the perimeter walls. The fall coloration of the seating, fully visible from Belvedere Castle, would be an interesting approach if it were always fall, but seating in a uniform dark color would be less obtrusive, as would dark finishes on all the light towers, which would preferably also be demountable. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, thank you. Next, I'll be calling on Kyle Johnson. Kyle, you should be receiving a request from me to rejoin the meeting as a panelist so that you're able to unmute your mic. All right, Kyle, please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, my commissioners and Chair Carroll. I've just lost my draft here. Okay, I'll try to read it with my magnifying glass. I had it on the screen, but it just disappeared when I joined as a panelist. I apologize for that little glitch. My name is Kyle Johnson. I am representing Docomomo US, New York Tri-State, a local chapter of an international organization working in over 65 countries around the world. Our mission is to increase public awareness and appreciation of modern architecture, landscapes, and urban design, to identify and document local examples, and to advocate for the protection of those determined most significant. Since 1996, our chapter has been advancing this mission in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So much for credentials. We have a number of concerns with the current proposal for renovating the Delacorte Theater in Central Park. While we take no exception to the numerous functional interventions addressing code compliance, life safety, handicapped accessibility, internal infrastructure, and the like, we find many of the visual modifications to be antithetical to the original design concept. Giorgio Cavalieri's objective in designing the theater in the 1970s was to make it fit as unobtrusively as possible into the natural surroundings of the park. To that end, seating was neutral in color, signage was modest in quantity and size, and the exterior facade was constructed of natural wood, much in the manner of West Coast modernism. The current proposal introduces multicolored seating, signage which is excessive in both quantity and size, and overly prominent light standards, all of which stand out from the natural surroundings rather than deferring to them. While the proposed new exterior facade is similar to the original, there is no real reason to replace the original at all, or to redesign the original at all. The replacement does not address the functional needs stated in the presentation. As a sensitive design by a notable architect who contributed greatly to New York City with projects that consistently fit into their context, hand in glove, whether that be a historic structure or a park, Giorgio Cavalieri's Delacorte Theater facade deserves to be treated with respect and restored as needed, not replaced unnecessarily. The architect himself deserves no less. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, I will be calling on Michael Gotkin. Michael, I see that you've dialed in, so you'll just need to press *6 once I allow you to talk. Okay, Michael, you just have to press *6 and then we should be able
to. I did, Sasha. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Sasha, very much. I'm talking on a regular old-fashioned telephone, so bit of a change from...
No worries. Please just state your name for the record.
My name is Michael Gotkin, and I'm speaking for myself, and I'm very glad to follow Kyle, speaking for Dokamoma, because he took care of many of the concerns that I would have mentioned. I want to take up where Kyle left off and emphasize that the building you see before you really is a Giorgio Cavalieri building. It's not the 1960 building. It was completely rebuilt in 1976. And keep in mind that that was 2 years after Central Park became an official city landmark. The Cavalieri building was designed in concert with the Landmarks Commission, specifically with James Marston Fitch, famous preservationist, who was at that time the director of preservation for Central Park, newly appointed. It went through a couple of design iterations, and finally they reused the footprint of what was a temporary plywood-clad building that had to be rebuilt continually. These are in Joseph Papp's own words, a temporary building, and to create a permanent structure. The structure was frankly modern, as you've heard. Victorian Society objects to that, but that's the way it was in the 1960s and 70s in Central Park. We had commissioners that favored modernism. But the building tried to fit in demurely, humbly into its landscape setting. But most importantly, the structure that Cavalieri designed is what we could call vernacular modernism. And as Kyle mentioned, it's a style you'd more see on the West Coast, most famously in the Sea Ranch on the coast of California. But this is an East Coast exponent of it. It's a style not well represented in other modernisms in New York City, let alone in Central Park, and we should try to preserve it. It's a beloved structure. You've heard that from many people. The canted walls, the new vertical siding, the uplighting, all of that run counter to Giorgio Cavalieri's original vision, which was all about exposed structure made evident. And one more thing that no one's mentioned yet, the reason that this structure was made evident and why Giorgio Cavalieri used the vernacular modernism style was to reference the Globe Theater. Actually, Christabel Goff mentioned it briefly. The 17th century theater that's associated with Shakespeare plays in London, which is a half-timbered structure. And Giorgio Cavalieri's modernist design pays homage to that original half-timbered construction. Not exactly, but it alludes to it. The drum shape, the awning. If you look under the awning, you can see the post and beam construction. So I would ask that the Commission consider Giorgio Cavalieri's important career in New York City, and this building is a unique work of modernism. No one has any beef with the need to upgrade the theater for accessibility and other back-of-house things. But the facade that you see that was renovated in 1997, not only very respectfully, but in concert with Cavalieri and using his original drawings, should continue today. The theater can be upgraded, but retain the integrity of Cavalieri's vernacular modernist design. And just for full disclosure, I actually was involved slightly with the 1997 restoration. I was working for the Conservancy, and my team designed the landscape around the theater, and we worked directly with the architects at that time. It was designed in 97, completed in 98, to restore Cavalieri's original design for the Delacorte Shakespeare Theater. I'm looking forward to the Commissioner's discussion of some of the issues that have been raised by myself and my preservation colleagues. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, Lori Beckelman, we'll try again. I will give you access to talk. Okay, and just if you hit *6, you should be able to unmute yourself from your phone.
I did. Can you?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay, great. Can you please just state your name?
That is amazing.
Yes.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Please just state your name for the record. We can hear you. Just state your name for the record.
I can.
All right.
I will. Lori Beckelman. Dear Commissioners, it's my pleasure to have this opportunity to testify before you today to lend my support of the Public Theater's application to renovate. And I clearly emphasize that word renovate because I've heard a lot of criticism about what is being proposed, which I do not agree with. For the record, I served as the chair of the Landmarks Commission, appointed by Mayor Dinkins in 1990 to 1994. It was one of the great privileges of my life to be able to serve with the commission and work with an incredible staff. Public theaters, Free Shakespeare and the Delacorte Theater, the brainchild of Joe Papp, is so important in the psyche of New York City. The proposed rehabilitation, designed by Enniad Architects, includes replacing the deteriorated wood cladding with new wood cladding. I know you saw the full presentation, that I do believe all of this appears more compatible with the natural textures of the park. The new design elements also solve the problems of antiquated signage that will now allow passersby in the park, as well as the theater patrons, to read in the round the delicately designed, the public Free Shakespeare Delacorte Theater. The revitalized exterior will truly provide a dynamic experience. I also note that proposed changes in the theater will be more functional and efficient for the public's crew and performers, and the accessibility work being proposed will allow so many more people with special needs to be able to more conveniently enter the Delacorte. In keeping with the spirit of what is appropriate for Central Park, a scenic landmark, I hope you'll agree that the updated design is an enhancement to the Delacorte. I would also like to add something else that I'm hoping the lawyers who will be talking to you, general on staff, as well as the counsel for the public, to talk about what this building is as it relates to the park. It is not a contributing building, never was. And if you look at what the park is and how in reference it has been described in the past, the Delacorte, I do believe that it is not taking away in the spirit of what Giorgio Cavalieri had proposed and that was finally executed. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, Michelle Arbalou, you'll be receiving a request from me. Okay, Michelle, I see that I think you declined the request. Let me see. Maybe you just you'll be receiving a request from me. Okay, Michelle, I see that you are rejoining. Okay, you're in the meeting, Michelle. Please just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, Michelle Arbalou speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds significant aspects of this proposal to be inappropriate. In particular, we believe the following architectural elements are unnecessary and should be carefully reconsidered. The candid reinterpretation of the building's wood-slatted facade, the expanded canopy size and form, the increased amount and amplitude of signage, the heightened light in towers, and the multicolored seats, all of which divert attention from the surrounding park rather than serving as a differential background. The Delacorte Theater is a significant work of architecture. It was designed by Giorgio Calvarelli, a prominent New York City architect who helped pioneer the concept of adaptive reuse within the discipline of historic preservation. The Delacorte is characterized by a rustic modernism that is well suited to the Central Park setting. Although the theater is not designated as an individual NYC landmark, it should be treated as such. Any modification to the original structure should be executed in the spirit of Cavalieri and his contribution to the city. Enid Architects had a substantial body of sensitively executed preservation and adaptive reuse projects that have involved minimal interventions. They have demonstrated their ability to carefully balance modern programmatic needs with historic preservation. The firm's work at Carnegie Hall and Giorgio Calvarelli's own Joseph Papp Public Theater are two fine examples. It would be an unfortunate irony were the same architects to unnecessarily alter the exterior appearance of Calvarelli's Delacorte Theater by making arbitrary formal modifications rather than simply addressing functional needs. HTC strongly recommends that the Commission ask the applicant to reconsider and rework elements of their design, specifically those that alter the theater's exterior form and appearance. In this case, a quiet, respectful approach to renovation is the appropriate way to act. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, Heather, you'll be receiving a request from me right now to rejoin. Okay, Heather, I see you've accepted my request. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You can turn on your camera if you wish. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Heather Lubov, and I'm the Executive Director of City Parks Foundation. We are a neighbor of the Delacortes in Central Park. We manage Summer Stage at Rumsey Playfield, as well as the Swedish Cottage Marionette Theater, which is right behind the Delacorte Theater. We are strong believers that culture belongs to everyone, and I can say from personal experience, having grown up in the city, that I am a direct beneficiary of free Shakespeare in the park. We are a parks organization first and foremost, and so we are very sensitive to how people use their parks, and we believe that this project will be respectful of its location in a park. I can also attest to the need for the renovations, having just renovated Summer Stage myself. A 20-year lifespan is about the most that you can get out of outdoor theater structure. The work that the public is proposing will increase accessibility and compliance and will be critical to their ability to continuing to provide high quality art to all New Yorkers, because New Yorkers should experience the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next, Thomas Collins, you'll be receiving a request from me right now. Okay, Thomas Collins, I see you have accepted my request. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You can turn on your camera if you wish, but you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Thomas Collins. I'm a graduate student at CUNY studying architectural and art history. I just want to provide a few comments today regarding changes to the Delacorte Theater. I think there are a lot of commendable aspects of this plan. I don't think anyone objects to improving accessibility and back of house functions, but there are a number of aspects that I find concerning and many others find concerning. And I would push back on the other person's comments regarding the significance of Cavalieri's designs. I think it is a significant work of modern architecture by a major preservation architect who, along with his Venetian contemporary Carlo Scarpa, really radically altered how we view the past in relationship to modern additions in historic buildings. And I think in the case of the Delacorte Theater, you really get a sense of a building that's unassuming and has a quiet dignity, and that sense of vernacular architecture really comes through. The architect was very fond of using very simplified geometric forms, and you can clearly read that connection in the Delacorte. And I think the proposed changes to the exterior seem unnecessary. It's a very sort of flashy, changes that I don't think add to the public experience in any meaningful way. I've never had any difficulties finding the theater or any of the wayfinding issues that I've heard in some of the testimonies. But the only other comment I would add is I think it needs to be stated that a number of Cavalieri's other works that are very significant have been altered or have disappeared in recent years. Just a few years ago, his entrance at the Fisk Theater on 57th Street, which was a very significant work of international style insertion into a storefront of a historic building, it was demolished. And people aren't noticing this or discussing it, but in a case like this where the building is significant and designated, I think that should play into the considerations at the commission. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Let me take a glance back over, and I do not see any more hands raised, and I did do all the sign-ups, so I will hand it right back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. Okay, and I just want to note for the record that in addition to Community Board 7's resolution recommending approval, which we've heard, we did receive a letter of support from Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine and a letter of support from the Municipal Art Society of New York. So now I'd like to turn back to the applicant team and ask if you would like to respond to some of the comments we've heard.
Yes, thank you. Bill, do you want to say a few words about the architect, John Cavalieri, and some of the comments that we've heard about that? Oh, Bill, I think you need to you might need to unmute.
Thank you. There's no question that Giorgio Cavalieri was a significant figure in adaptive reuse, particularly in the 60s and 70s, and particularly in New York City. But there's also no question that as such, he was a practical man as well as a visionary in terms of adaptively reusing historic buildings. And I think his practicality is pretty clearly shown in his work at the Delacorte. He recognized that lighting needed to be significantly upgraded. And so he added 4 major new lighting towers, very visible, very functional in style, et cetera, but necessary. He was willing to change the design of the original cladding from a sort of ornamental patterned plywood to a straight board design. One of his early designs for cladding was in fact concrete. He was concerned, as is everyone, about how long the wood can last in that kind of environment. So he proposed concrete, which did not make it through the design and design review process. So what I'm saying is that what Cavalieri did was to start with the original design. By the way, there's been a lot of confusion here that where Cavalieri has been sort of described as the original architect, and he wasn't. So I just think that, like all of us in this field, we should really try to stick to the facts. We, of course, want to interpret them in a way that is useful, but we should stick to them. And so Cavalieri took the original design and he made some practical architectural changes, as he should have. And the 90s work did the same thing. And the proposal that you have before you today is working precisely in that same tradition. And please don't forget, this is more for the architects to emphasize than me, but over and over again, the cant has been described as a stylistic gesture. But I think you've heard in significant detail functionally how important the cant is to allow extra seating in order to make the building more accessible. And I'll just finish with this. One of the things that makes preservation fascinating is that it often involves the conflict of competing goods. Who could deny the importance and the good to our culture of Shakespeare in the Park and of accessibility and of democratic availability of the arts to everyone? Of course, that is a good. And it needs to be served, and its needs change, and those changing needs need to be responded to. Historic preservation is also a good, but I think that there needs to be a balance here, and I think it's a balance that is very much struck in this design. And again, I have to say, I think it's unfortunate when the historical facts about such matters as who was the original architect and what they did and didn't do are stretched to meet a purpose that I think is out of balance with the original reason for which this building was designed and with its continuing mission in the city. Thank you.
Bill. I have just a couple other things. I don't know if we can go to page 65, but if we can, I think that will be helpful just as we're speaking about the signage matter. But as Bill mentioned, we just want to reiterate that this is a renovation of an existing facility. We're even going so far as to, we're keeping the existing steel, we're keeping the existing footprint, we're maintaining the same certificate of occupancy. So I know that there have been some suggestions that it now looks like a stadium or like some other type of facility, but the reality is the facility looks the way that it looks. And that's been the case for a long time. Oh, I'm so sorry. I meant 45 instead of 65. This one probably won't help us very much. So we do want to say we appreciate all the feedback on signage. And just to reiterate, there are three different distinct, yep, that's the one, types of signage that serve separate and important purposes. So the permanent wayfinding signage and Delacorte name does not change from year to year, and it is integral to the building itself. That's what you see on the right side of your screen. Everything else you've seen is removable. So what you see on the total proposed signage on the left here, the removable licensee signage, which says public free shakes are in the park, is removable, and we've shown how that will be built and proved that it is removable, and that will be dealt with subject to the terms of our license agreement with the Parks Department. And the seasonal signage is up only during our shows, and it is approved by the Parks Department annually. So again, what you see on the right is the only permanent signage that we are proposing. And the majority of the signage is not up year round. And as you heard from some of the folks who gave testimony, although I'm glad to hear many of you are able to find the theater quite easily, we are charged by the city of New York with serving people from all 5 boroughs. And as you heard earlier, many people are visiting this theater for the very first time. They're visiting Central Park for the very first time. They're visiting a theater for the very first time. And sometimes they have trouble finding it. So our goal is to serve people from all walks of life in all boroughs, not just the people who live near Central Park and are familiar with its layout and amenities. And then just to note, as Bill mentioned, the cant design is not arbitrary or driven by aesthetics. It's what allows the addition of the back row, which makes up for the seats that we're losing in making more wheelchair accessible locations and wider seats. The cant will have a minor visual effect with a larger impact on seating. And then just finally, we are very proud to be presenting this today with resolutions of support from all 5 community boards that touch Central Park, as well as the support of Central Park Conservancy, the New York Community Trust, which stewards the Delacorte Family Trust, several preservation groups and advocacy groups that advocate to create greater access to arts and culture in Central Park. So we were really happy to get to meet with many, many folks along the way, many elected officials, many advocacy groups, parks groups, preservation groups, and to incorporate all of that feedback. And that's why we feel today's design that we've presented is appropriate. And I think that's all we have, unless there are other questions I can answer.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I don't see any questions, so I am going to start sending you requests to unmute so that we can move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so before we get started, I just want to note, because I think that there's been some confusion about significance, not significant. You know, this Delacorte Theater is an incredibly important institution in this city, and has been, and hope and will continue to be. And so it is certainly significant, and its structure is significant in its own. Having said that, our purview here is to evaluate it in the context of the scenic landmark. That is the landmark that is under our jurisdiction. So as former Chair Lori Beckelman mentioned, this is not an individual landmark, and it's not necessarily even a contributing building in this scenic landmark. And I think she said this because if you look at the designation report, it really describes this as a temporary structure, and it was, you know, just so young at the time that the scenic landmark was designated. So I think it was sort of too young to have any evaluation or consideration as the historic structures in the park had. So our purview here is to evaluate the effect on the scenic landmark. And we can evaluate the existing building and its relationship to the scenic landmark and to the other earlier structures in the park as a guide, you know, noting that it's a discrete presence within the landscape due to its form and its materials. And, you know, we can evaluate the proposed renovation and signage in that same context. But I think as we discuss this, our comments should be related to the scenic landmark, which is our purview here. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you start this one?
Sure. So anyone who has, anybody who has gone to the Delacorte Theater to see Shakespeare loves this venue. Maybe except when it rains or when you're standing online for the restroom and can't find it. But I have to say I have such a warm place in my heart for the Delacorte Theater and all the performances I've attended here, and in the scenic landmark. And I have to be honest, I'm very, very excited about the fact that after, you know, it's been here for 60 years with some modifications, but in order to ensure its continuity and and its operation and its accessibility and its even its relevance, you know, and I'm going to say this is a cultural institution. Every cultural institution needs to be taken care of, maintained, renovated, expanded, made more accessible, easier to get in and out of, easier to locate. And some of those institutions, I'm speaking, you know, very broadly here, happen to be historic landmarks, and some are just very important in cultural settings, which this is, and it happens to be situated in a very important landmark, the park. So I just want to say that when I first really took a good look at this design, I was very happy to see that in so many ways that this design did not actually try to dramatically change what's there right now. I mean, the exterior is reclad with a variety of sustainable solid woods, you know, just like the exterior of the existing building is made of wood. You know, there's still a canopy there. The canopy of the original, you know, faces down a little bit, whereas the canopy of the new design kind of slants up just a bit, almost like the brim of a hat that's kind of perking up. And in a way, I felt that, you know, it's a little more welcoming. And that is so much what the part of the mandate of what Joe Papp developed here is all about, to create this venue and make it accessible to people of all, you know, ages, walks of life, etc. And I feel like the design, in a way, the renovation pays homage to what his original intent was. So as I said, I feel like I was heartened by the materials used on the exterior and the fact that there was something kind of uplifting in the turn of the canopy without making an incredible, you know, a big statement. I think it's important to have signage on the outside of the structure that names what this is. And I think the signage doesn't speak too loudly. I think it's very respectful of the structure whose brim it sits upon. I really, I have to say that the lighting doesn't seem to be overdone to me. It's important not only for the production, but for navigating your way through the theater, especially when it's dark out. And this is not only for the patrons who are attending, it's also for the people who work there during the performance, before the performance, after the performance, the next morning, the actors. Now, all of this is, it's important. The signage doesn't seem to be, you know, this is a program of Joe Papp's Public Theater. And the signage to me is an extension of what's there. And I don't think there's too much. And I do want to say that from a wayfinding perspective, I think it's very, very important for people to be able to find their way to this theater and find their way around this small complex. And it is small, it's not a stadium. There are not 30,000 seats in an arena here. There may be 2,000. I mean, I'm not sure of the exact number. It's very intimate. It's one of the things that makes the experience of sitting in a performance and being so up close to the stage and the actors, and to so exhilarating for someone who's there. I also want to say, I just want to bring up a couple of other things that I think, oh, the seating. The first thing I thought when I saw the colors of the seats is that what a wonderful idea that the colors are really drawn from the park. The way that the leaves change color in the fall, and you know, they're green in the spring, and they're just kind of scattered here throughout the inside of this space in a way that, again, I think doesn't insult, doesn't scream. It coexists and it pays homage. So I'm just not to cover every single item here. I do want to say that I do agree with Diana Chapin in requesting that the park do whatever it can to work on the comfort stations at the same time, so that when the facility is done, the people who work and attend performances here and gather here can really have all of the amenities that they need. I think that that's important. I just want to also thank all of the public servants who spoke today and all of the community members who spoke today for all of their perspectives on this. And I do want to call out Gordon Davis for his words and actually for all that he has done for the city overall and for the park. And I personally and professionally appreciate your contribution. That's it.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Jefferson.
I have three elements, or four. And one of these is a structure in a scenic landmark. This is a structure in a scenic landmark. And I think it's appropriate. And here's why. The existing building was quieter and less dynamic, agreed. This one is a little bit more dynamic, and it's dynamic not because of function and aesthetics. By shifting the wall slightly, you created a new formal element, but you also used function you used it to make more seats. So it's kind of a architectural way of using function to create aesthetics. And I think that works. I think the canopy is the same thing, because you wanted to enlarge the canopy where most of the crowd is, a functional notion. The canopy extends out more and then shifts back into a smaller scale. And I think that's beautiful. I think it's okay for this new interpretation to use subtle formal elements to describe a different time. I buy into that. And finally, the color of the seats, I think it's such a fun thing. It enlivens it when I looked at it in the pictures. The other elements, I mean, this architect did an incredible job, I thought, in taking all these elements, lighting, signage, ticket booths, grandstand, theater, all of that, and looked at each element carefully and beautifully and created this wonderful thing.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
He had to leave, I believe.
Oh, all right, sorry. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Thanks. So I think that with respect to our charge, which is to evaluate the changes and modifications to this structure and the effect the impact on the scenic landmark, the scenic site, I think that the design sort of imperative to not grow the footprint so as not to dramatically change or even minimally change the way that it sits on the ground on the site was a very important kind of guiding first decision. And with respect to that, I think that what proceeded moves towards making it absolutely appropriate for us to and for us to accept the fact that a change might happen, but that it will not impact dramatically the way we actually traverse the ground there. But I do want to say that, and so I think it is an appropriate proposal. But I do want to say that the notion that this is just a minimal change to the building, almost not even at all, is just it's a funny kind of situation. Yes, maybe dimensionally there's not been much of a change, but and so dimensionally and with respect to scale, there's not a lot of a change. But the fact that this is a change from a cylindrical shape to a conical geometry, those two things are radically different from one another. And so if you can imagine, if we can all imagine that, I don't know, the Colosseum in Rome, or say the Globe Theater, another almost cylinder, or Castle Clinton were to change its exterior to Kant, we would be up in arms. I mean, or if we wouldn't be up in arms, we certainly would just identify the fact that that is a dramatic, formal, geometrical change, a departure. And I think that that's what this is. Again, with respect to the building, it does not make the kind of the act, what happens to the actual ground, the building in the ground, in the scenic landmark, inappropriate, but it does dramatically change the building. The sensibility is entirely different. It goes from, the whole thing about a cant in an amphitheater is that it happens on the inside. So one could say that there would have been other ways to think about this, but I think those would have sort of taken up more room in the footprint. And so in this sense, it was pretty ingenious to reverse the kind of the direction of the cant and retain the language of amphitheater. But all in all, I have to say that with respect to our purview, it is appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith.
Yes, I think Adi really summed it up really well. There is a trade-off between the footprint that you sort of perceive as you walk around and the impact of the overall building on the scenic landscape, as opposed to this canting of the walls, which is definitely I mean, I wouldn't call it radical, but it definitely is a striking change to the reading of the building. But I think that it's in the spirit of the Giorgio Cavalieri design. I think the use of the wood in this form is appropriate. And I think that as Jeannie pointed out, the canopy, the prior canopy was pointed down and was sort of downward facing, and this one is a little more welcoming in the fact that it kind of tips up, and I think that it will help visitors who are looking for the theater, and the enlarged canopy will be an improvement. So I think all in all, the impact on the scenic landmark is not detrimental, so I can find it appropriate. I don't think that the seat color is appropriate, though. I think the multicolored seats call too much attention to them. I think that should be something more quiet, one color. I think the rest I can find appropriate.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, thank you. Well,
I think that this renovation is sorely needed after 20 years, and that the work to accomplish accessibility is also needed and appropriate. In general, I think the massing, the design, the materials are appropriate. And in the dark, with the winding paths of Central Park and the crowds and the fact that people do have trouble finding their way around Central Park, particularly in the dark, it is necessary to have signage and also to have I think the enlarged canopy with uplighting is a good idea and is necessary. I think that obviously they should take care to make sure that the lighting is soft and appropriate and not overdone. It's always difficult with renderings to really get a sense of what that's going to look like. So I think just some care in making sure that it's an appropriate degree of uplighting is important. But I think that it's necessary and good to have there. And the larger bluestone area that goes with it is, I think, also appropriate, knowing the crowds that mill around there and wait for tickets and getting to the boxes and so forth. The signage and banners, I think, are generally appropriate. And I think that the idea, someone talked about public theater getting too much sort of attention. To me, it's saying that the theater is public and free. It's not advertising the public theater because of the way the wording is. It's not about that. It's about telling people this is a public and free facility, which I think is quite important. I do feel that maybe 3 signs are really unnecessary and too much, and that one sign over the main entrance really works adequately, especially if you have lighting. We didn't have we're not seeing that as a possibility, so it's a little hard to tell, but it seems to me that it may be excessive. I also agree with Commissioner Holford Smith on while the idea of the colored seat sounds very nice and looks kind of pretty in the presentation. It's going to be plastic seating. There's only 1 month of the year when it's fall, and this is not. It is ultimately and originally an intrusion in the park. It's a wonderful intrusion, but it is an intrusion. So I think from a distance, seeing it and calling attention to itself with colors is not a good idea. And that the darker, just having a dark green seating is much more appropriate. I think the fencing is appropriate, including using it for screening the equipment and having it somewhat denser in some places. That's fine. And I think that after all this time, the lighting towers do need to be upgraded. So I'm very supportive of that as well. And I want to thank all the people for their testimony. And my former commissioner, Gordon, was great. And Lori Beckelman and Sam Waterston was great to hear. I agreed so much with what he had to say. So anyway, thank everyone for their testimony, whether they completely agree with what's being proposed or not, because we always appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Goldblum.
I guess my view of this is that it is not a structure whose design is inherently protected in the way that other designated individual buildings are. It's kind of, I'm looking at it like a design for a building that is relatively contemporary, that was approved by the commission for its own appropriateness for its setting, and then is being asked to be modified. So therefore, and I also think that the intent of the structure, whether it was the original from the 60s or the Cavalieri versions or it's really intended as an element in the park to be viewed as a temporary festival structure, even if it's, rather permanent by now. But I think its aesthetic being made out of wood, being relatively opaque, being relatively simple, is meant to suggest a temporary festival structure, which is appropriate again to the, the model that was cited for the theater. So I think from that point of view, Cavalieri's choice of the cedar, the simple form, the simple awning, a very blank facade, both at the pedestrian level and up above, are elements that this design shares and that are appropriate for the scenic landmark. And to the extent that those elements can be preserved, even if the Cavalieri material or design is not, I think it can remain an appropriate design. But I think a couple of minor comments. First of all, I agree with Diana about the signage. I think there is too much. And I think also I would say that it's in the wrong place. If you're, whenever I've approached the Delacorte, it's always been from one of the pathways, and you come at it obliquely, you come at it with lots of tree cover around it, and you really can't see that. You don't really look above the canopy level. So having the signage above the canopy seems to me to be a mistake on two levels. First of all, it makes it much too prominent to the public. Second of all, it makes it less functional to those trying to find the place. Nobody is wayfinding off of the current Delacorte sign, which is 20, 30 feet up in the air. And I don't think that many people would be wayfinding off of this one. So I would suggest that the sign move to below the fascia instead of above it. I do think that the Shakespeare in the Park, the temporary signage, is too large and should be scaled down. The theater sign should definitely be perceived to be more permanent, more prominent, and the temporary signage should be smaller. Whether it's integrated into the band or whether it's attached lettering, I think it has to be more deferent to the overall structure. One of the other comments I had was that one of the things that was missed from the original Cavalieri scheme, which contributed to its kind of festival design nature, were the flags. I think that the parapet of the original design and the parapet of the Cavalieri design were very much characterized by a very festive array of sticks poking in the air, flagpoles, lighting. And I think that this scheme feels overly dour and kind of monumental and lacks that festival quality. I would suggest that they consider adding that back to the original. Somehow, I guess it got lost over the years, but if you look at the photographs provided, the original photographs of the Cavalieri design and the drawings show a very animated top edge, which I think led very much to the reading of this as a festival structure. And lastly, I think that the underside of the canopy is very significant. And here looks to me like a convention center ceiling. I think that the simplicity and kind of countrified, as it was said, like the kind of the West Coast modernism feel of the Cavalieri should be carried over either in the cedar, the textured cedar, or in the zinc, and that the fascia also should perhaps be a little bit less black and maybe more of the zinc gray color to recall the Cavalieri and to kind of, again, blend it more into the landscape and not have it be as assertive, have it be deferent to the landscape.
Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think I'm taking a more minimal view of this thing in light of the fact that what we are chiefly concerning ourselves with is the imposition of this object within that thing, which is the scenic district, which is the park. And so that's my principal concern. And Giorgio Cavalieri was an amazing guy. And in my estimation, James Stewart Polshek was an amazing guy, and his philosophy lives on in Ennead. And I think they have approached this in the best way that they could have. And they have managed to, you know, I don't even want to talk about this building that much because it is what it is. And I find it completely appropriate for what it's doing in the park. Is there some nitpicking I could do? Yeah, I agree with Michael completely about the signage. It should be lower. You know, to me, the existing and this new one is actually a relatively subtle object within the park, and I think it needs to remain that way. They've managed to get more seating. They've improved the entry and exit process, which is one of the biggest pains in the butt having to do with this theater. It's none of our business how many bathrooms it has. As far as I'm concerned, it's none of my business what color the seats are. What concerns me is this object. I think they've done a remarkable job. The signage will help people to not be confused as they're walking through the park if it's done the way that Michael Goldblum has suggested. In any case, I don't want to go on about this. I think Bill Higgins pointed out correctly, there was a lot of stretching and irrelevant information about this thing during this presentation. The reality is this is an appropriate injection into the park as a renovation.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree in that this is appropriate in the sense that we often take things for granted until it is gone. So imagine that for 60 years, if you didn't make any improvement, and I think in the context of some of the major deficiencies of the the wayfinding and the lighting, especially the times we live in. Too bad the rendering is not showing how this will appear in the dark as we enjoy coming out of the theater or looking for the theater waiting in line, because I remember this is much more of a nighttime experience. So I think that I agree. We are not here we can always tweak the design and a lot of elements. But I think the material is correct. I think that I hear the testimonies from the other side about, I think it is also about that, as the applicant's attorney said, well, is the competing of the two goods. And I think in the way of providing the improvement in the ADA accessibility, our populations are getting not younger. No one is getting younger. I think I do agree with some of the comments about the quality of lighting is important. Obviously, that's in the details, the type of lighting, the soft lighting. But I think in terms of enhancing safety, wayfinding, guiding people, providing a sense of security and comfort, better access, I think we could not fault this application.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you all. And again, I want to thank the applicants for a very considered proposal and a very thoughtful presentation. I want to thank all members of the public who participated today on all sides. All of your opinions are valuable and inform our discussions. And of course, commissioners, I want to thank you for all of your thoughtful comments and attention to everything that we've heard. So I think where we are is we actually, I think, have enough to vote on this today with a couple of modifications. One, to have the staff work on creating a more neutral or single color for the seats, and to study the amount and placement of the signage. I think Commissioner Goldblum, you made a couple of other suggestions that I think we'd encourage the applicant to continue to think about as they develop this, but I think we would have enough with just those two modifications. So I'll go ahead and make this motion. In the matter of LPC 2204971 Central Park, Delacorte Theater, a scenic landmark, an open-air theater built at the southwest edge of the Great Lawn in 1962 within an English Romantic-style public park designed in 1857 by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Box. This is an application to modify the shell, replace cladding, infill signage, lighting towers, seating, stairs, decking, and fencing, install a canopy and banners, and construct a barrier-free access ramp. And I recommend the commission issues a positive report, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant historic, architectural, or landscape feature, that the work will occur within a section of the park which has been significantly altered over time, including the removal of the reservoir, construction of the theater, and pathway reconfiguration. Therefore, this work will not alter or disrupt an intact composition of the original features or design, that the theater has been substantially rebuilt over the years. Therefore, there is no significant original material remaining, that the cladding, infill, marquee, fencing, decking at and around the theater will be simply designed and feature materials and finishes which will blend with surrounding landscaping, thereby helping them to harmonize with their context and remain a secondary presence, that the angling back of the outer wall of the theater will be a subtle change to the form of the building, which will help to support upgrades to the accessibility of the theater by facilitating the relocation of seating, that the vertical orientation, slight projections, variations in pattern and narrow width of the cladding slats will help the structure to relate well to the scale and form of the surrounding trees and natural environment and recede from view, that the marquee will be consistent with the types of appendages typically found at theater buildings in terms of placement and compatibly scaled with the building, that the replacement of lighting towers will feature simply designed open framing and safety cages and a dark finish and will not exceed the maximum height of the existing towers or the surrounding tree canopy, helping them to remain a subordinate presence within views of the surrounding landscape, that the reorganization of the seating, widening of the aisles, and the installation of new barrier-free access ramps, lifts, and stairs will improve accessibility and enhance the visitor experience without significantly changing the appearance of the theater from the surrounding landscape. That the signage at the building will be non-illuminated, limited in size, and placed at and below the marquee and will feature a neutral color palette except for a limited amount of seasonal signage without color restrictions below the marquee, that the seasonal banners will be consistent with the types of wayfinding signage found throughout the park in terms of placement and types of signs, and except within close proximity to the building, will only be seen through the dense foliage of the surrounding landscape during the performance season, that the replacement fencing assembly featuring wider spacing at the taller pickets and no top rail will be well scaled to the building and compatible with the surrounding parkland, while also maintaining existing security and screening for the theater surface areas, and that the replacement paving with footprint adjustments associated with the lining with the marquee will be compatible with adjoining paving in terms of material, pattern, and finish, and will not result in a significant reduction in the footprint of the surrounding landscape. However, I recommend that the applicant continue to work with the staff to study the amount and location of the signage and to study the color of the seating to achieve a single, more neutral color. Okay, Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
I second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Eric Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Great, thank you. And I just want to add to the recommendation that I made that they are to restudy the signage at the canopy specifically. All right, thank you. All right, so that concludes our day. I want to thank you all for your dedication and commitment, as always, to our important work. And at this late hour, it's 5 o'clock, when we expected a shorter day. So thank you all for all that you do for us. Have a wonderful evening.